All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are now going to resume our council session, and we are going to begin with our public hearings, and specifically item number 7. For a little context and background, this is the first time that we have tried the hybrid option, and so there will be some people testifying virtually and some in person. I once again want to thank our IT team and Public Information Office team for working diligently to dot the I's and cross the T's, but I do respectfully and humbly request everybody's patience if we have some challenges working through the kinks this first time around. So we'll see how this goes, but well, we'll see how this goes. Let's move on to, so we will start with item number 7. Just get my script here. This is a public hearing on special appropriation to the county government's FY22 operating budget for the Department of Health and Human Services in the amount of $2,539,747 for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Crisis Cooperative Agreement and COVID-19 Public Health Workforce Supplemental Funding Grant. Source of funds is state funds. An HHS committee work session will be scheduled at a later date. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before March 29th. And I do not believe we have any speakers for this public hearing. This is the easy one. So this public hearing is now closed. That moves us on to item number 8. This is a public hearing on special appropriations to Montgomery County Government's FY22 operating budget for the Economic Development Partnership non-departmental account in the amount of $789,000 for incubator programs. Source of funds is the general fund reserves. A Fed committee work session will be scheduled at a later date. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before March 19th. And there are speakers for this public hearing. The first 3 speakers will be testifying virtually. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to complete their testimony. And we apologize in advance, again, if there are any issues, and I may have to cut you off if we go beyond those 2 minutes, but I will do so kindly. We will first hear from Sarah Abdelkhalik.
Hello, thank you so much for your time and for pronouncing my last name in the perfect way. My name is Sarah Abdelkhalik. I'm a Montgomery County constituent. Social entrepreneur. I'm working with 61 families, Afghan newcomers, new refugees who joined our county, and that is almost 250 individuals, and the age range is from 2 until 64 years old. So regarding this item, I would love to ask, would you please describe the budget decision under consideration for the amount suggested? Like, how did you decide on this amount? Was it a proposal coming from certain organizations participating in the economic incubator and economic development project? And what are the intended results by numbers? Our refugees are generally observing and delivering messages to us that resettlement agencies, career development program partners are mainly caring for putting them in any survival jobs without taking into consideration their high skilled portfolio, if I can say. There are civil engineers, there are people with 17 years of international development incubator program, and they are continuously being pushed just to accept any job as a cashier, which definitely is good as a survival job, but this is, I think, is a waste of resource. It's like a vicious circle. So in this item, the additional, I guess, $350,000 for WorkSource Montgomery to support refugees and immigrant adults to assist them with professional development and vocational training, etc., etc. What's the plan for implementation by WorkSource in spending this additional fund? And
Ms. Abdelkhalik, thank you so much for your testimony, and your questions have been noted, and we will follow up with you with those responses.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear also virtually from Ms. Kim Jones.
Good afternoon, council members. I want to thank you for your commitment to our sector. The leadership by Council Members Reamer and Jawando, with extensive personal experience as nonprofit executives, has really been instrumental to the success of the charities in the county. Council Members Friedson and Glass personally opened doors for Nonprofit Village and its members. National data, though, has been coupled with anecdotal evidence that confirms that Black-led nonprofits were under-resourced, less well-connected, and lacked significant philanthropic funding or financial reserves to help them weather the storm of the pandemic. Racial and social injustice, less experienced governing bodies, and inequitable funding contributes to a long-standing disparity. My partners at the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce and Black Business Council have helped provide targeted resources, and they've been a unifying voice for Black businesses, including nonprofits, through the Black Collective. I wholeheartedly support the special appropriation for funding for these businesses and nonprofits introduced by Council Members Reamer and Jawando and supported by the entire Council. We've been working with 29 Black executives as well as Hispanic and Asian executives, thanks in part to MCEDC funding last year. And through this appropriation, we'll be able to provide more culturally appropriate development training, subject matter coaching, personal leadership support, and rent subsidies for office space. I want to thank the Council for the investment it's made to the nonprofit sector and the businesses that are vital to the county's growing economy. We're very proud to partner with you to provide these critically important services. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones, and you were right on time. Next, I believe, my understanding is Shantae Christina Sewell is not here. Is that still accurate, virtually?
That is correct.
Thank you, Equin. So then next we will actually hear in person from Mr. Jake Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Thank you to the sponsors of this resolution. The county executive is supportive of this resolution, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with the council to support our minority, female, and disabled-owned businesses in this county. We see this proposal as a good first step, which is expanded upon in the county executive's proposed budget. We want to thank the members of the Black Collective, the Black Chamber, the Black Business Council, and Nonprofit Village in working with the county executive on his proposal. As you're aware, his budget includes $877,000 to provide funding to address disparities in the Black business community and to provide training and resources to the Montgomery County business community, which includes $750,000 as a grant to the Black Chamber of Commerce to allow for increased outreach and engagement, and $127,000 grant to the Black Business Council, which will allow for the growth of the database and information sharing initiative for the county's MFD owned program. This funding that's in this resolution, combined with what's proposed in the county executive's budget, helps to ensure that we're providing more tools to more businesses in our county in a more equitable manner. We do want to flag that there may be legal issues for the council to work out in this proposal to avoid running into constitutional issues raised under the current Supreme Court holdings under City of Richmond versus J.A. Crossan. I believe council staff has been in touch with the Office of County Attorney and would hope that we can work together to avoid getting on the wrong side of the court system. We'd also urge council staff to take the necessary action to amend Schedule G, the non-compete agreement, to ensure that we can have a successful implementation of this. Thank you again to council members Reamer and Jawando and the entire council for your leadership, and we look forward to working with you on passing this resolution.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Weissman. Has Shantae Christina Sewell been able to join us?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, then this public hearing is now closed, which takes us on to item number 9. This is a public hearing on an amendment to the FY through 26 Capital Improvements Program and Supplemental Appropriation number 2266 to the FY 22 capital budget for the Montgomery County Government Department of Health and Human Services for the Martha B. Gudelski Child Development Center and sewer improvements in the amount of $1,082,000. Source of funds is recordation tax premium. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. And there are no speakers for this public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Harker to make some comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I am really glad and relieved that we're finally at this day. The Godelski Child Care Center sewer improvements are finally going to be the last step in making this world-class, wonderful child care facility move forward. The supplemental appropriation is absolutely money well spent for a project that the community's been waiting on for many, many years. We have a child care crisis countywide in the region, and particularly in Silver Spring, downtown Silver Spring, where we've added tens of thousands of residents in the last few years and very few child care facilities. So this is a wonderful public-private partnership with very generous private support from the Godelski family. It's been waiting for many years since the community was promised it under Mr. Leggett, and there are parents of kids who anticipated being able to attend a few years ago who still don't have a facility. So I'm really glad that all this has been worked out and this is moving forward, and I'd urge everybody to support it. Thank you so much.
Would you like to make the motion?
I so moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Enthusiastically.
All right. Moved by Councilmember Hucker, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. Let me just say really quickly, this is full circle for me. I was on the committee that reviewed the applications and selected the Godelski project about 7 years ago. So it's good to be here today. All those in favor of this appropriation, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present. I believe Councilmember Jawando at some point will be joining us virtually as well. All right, that moves us on to item number 10. This is a public hearing on the special appropriation to the county government's FY22 operating budget for the Department of Health and Human Services in the amount of $2,109,404 for the COVID mass vaccination CARES grant. Source of funds is state funds. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. There are no speakers for this public hearing, and so this public hearing is now closed. Can I get a motion to accept the recommendation of this appropriation? So moved. Second. Moved by Councilmember Glass, seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present. Which takes us to item number 11. This is a public hearing on a special appropriation to the county government's FY22 operating budget for the Department of Recreation in the amount of $100,000 for the expansion of sports leagues for girls. The source of funds is general fund reserves. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. We do have speakers for this public hearing. Our first speaker is Mr. Jeff Wagner. Mr. Wagner, if you could come forward. And if Jerry Ingram could also go ahead and come forward, and then you will speak as soon as Mr. Wagner is finished. Mr. Wagner, you've got a button on your little console there that you need to press.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Jeff Wagner, Moco Lacrosse, formerly Rosemary Hills Lacrosse. We started 22 years ago at the Gwendolyn Caulfield Center in their summer fun camp program. We then expanded to the White Oak Community Center summer camp when it first opened. So for 1.5 to 2 hours each day, we teach lacrosse to boys and girl campers, most of whom have never been exposed to the sport. While lacrosse has been a varsity sport in the county's public schools since 1998, access to the sport has been limited in the less affluent communities. Significant barriers include high equipment costs and lack of lacrosse programs for younger kids. For each location, we hire 10 high school lacrosse players as counselors and 1 or 2 local high school lacrosse coaches. We're a 501c3, so we offer community service credit or an hourly rate of $14 to the high schoolers and a $35 an hour rate for the adult coaches. This past fall, we were in an after-school activity at Lorderman and White Oak Middle Schools as part of the Department of Recreation's Rec Extra and Excel Beyond the Bell programs. Thank you, Robin, Adrian, and the council. We're currently working with the Department of Recreation to expand to up to 6 community centers this summer and up to 6 middle schools in the fall. I'm passionate about this because I see the discrepancy between lacrosse programs in the affluent and the less affluent parts of the county. I hire coaches and players from all parts of the county. Some down county schools have gated and lighted AstroTurf fields, and all players have top-of-the-line equipment, while Springbrook, I'll be specific, shares a poorly maintained practice field with the middle school and has to scrounge for or borrow equipment for some of its players, while Whitman and BCC boosters pay for equipment for the very few who might need financial help. My experience with girls. We found it's harder to get them to stick with lacrosse once they hit 11 or 12 years old because it doesn't seem to be cool by their peers, even if they have become skilled from their younger years at the camp. Also, there seems to be more pressure on girls than boys to get home after school for family obligations, taking care of siblings, house chores, etc. My 2 minutes are up. I thank you for the time. After 20 plus years of this, I do have many anecdotal stories regarding the unlevel playing field in the county. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Wagner. Next, we will hear from Jerry Ingram.
And which button was that?
It's already pressed. You're good.
Oh, good morning to the council. My name is Jerry Ingram. I'd like to thank you first for the well-maintained tennis courts that every middle school and high school have in Montgomery County, as well as the many tennis courts in the public parks. I began playing tennis at the public parks at Wheaton Regional and Pilgrim Hills, as well as at White Oak Middle School and Springbrook High School. And while there is several youth sports identified for the appropriation of funding, tennis is not listed, and I'm here to request that tennis be added to the program offerings by the Recreation Department. The current tennis landscape has seen an increase of 1 million players in 2021. During the pandemic, tennis ranked #1 sport to play due to its socially distanced nature. In this area alone, over 1 million people over the age of 6 play tennis. And through the USTA initiatives, there's dedicated curriculum for girls in tennis that could assist in this initiative. 1 in 3 girls quit the sport versus 1 in 10 boys in their 10 years. Girls who play tennis and other sports also excel in their life skills, their higher self-esteem, graduation rate, and college attendance. And although I am in the Montgomery County Tennis Hall of Fame and play professional tennis, and I hold the high school record here, but my fondest memory is playing on the park and recreation programs, playing high school tennis, and even though I played professional tennis, I always came home to play on the Albany public tennis courts. And although there are not many programs that provide crucial physical, mental, and social benefits for girls as there are for boys, I would like to add tennis to the list of offerings in the special appropriation of funds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Got 2 all-star testimonies there. Those were really terrific. That is it for our speakers for this public hearing. So this public hearing is now closed. Councilmember Rice wanted to make some comments.
Well, thank you very much. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here last Tuesday and be added as a co-sponsor. So I would like to be added as a co-sponsor to the resolution because I think that in spirit, this is exactly what we need to do. I do agree with the last public testimony speaker, however, that there are so many sports that we see that we need to do a better job of enhancing when it comes to our communities of color. My girls played golf, and it's sad that in 2022, even at the men's level, Harold Varner III is the only professional golfer on the PGA Tour that is black. 1. And when we look at what's happening with so many of these sports, there's got to be diversification. It's got to start at the recreation level. I applaud the great things that our Department of Recreation has done, which is why we always ask for so much more. What you did with Chill, another one of the programs that is near and dear to my heart that enhances the ability for folks, primarily our students of color, to get into snowboarding and now into skateboarding. Those are the kinds of things that are game changers for us because we know how lucrative they are. We've seen them and how individuals who are successful certainly can help to monetize their efforts, but also bring awareness. What you had spoken about, sir, is exactly one of the challenges is that it becomes cool when a famous person gets on that looks like them. And that's what we need more of. And so I think that this resolution is well timed in terms of really focusing on our communities of color. But I do think that, and it is my hope that we can continue to expand this to other programs that woefully need this support as well. I wish that programs like First Tee and others were able to break the ground in getting folks in it, but the reality is that it hasn't been successful. And so having programs like this that are sponsored by our Department of Recreation, where we know and we see the great things that they do, are going to be, I think, instrumental, not just here, but also serve as models across the country of how we can get more people of color involved in these sports. So I thank everyone for their advocacy and look forward to continuing to work with you on promoting all of these sports for equal play for everyone in our community. So thank you, guys.
Well said, Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Reamer, then I have some comments as well. Councilmember Reamer.
Well, I was going to make a motion because this is public hearing followed by action. So I would make the motion, make some remarks, and then pass it to you, or
Sounds good.
Is that
Yep.
that works? Great. Well, I would like to move. Is the public hearing closed? Is that right?
The public hearing is closed.
Okay. So I'd like to move approval of the appropriation, and I want to express my great appreciation for the Department of Recreation and our excellent testimony today, which I think really put a point on it. This is a very exciting new direction for us. Well, a strengthening of our desires and our intent. And I have seen this firsthand. We've been talking for a number of years about volleyball. You know, how could we have more volleyball programming in the county? And I think we were hoping to do that at one point, and then, you know, everything kind of went haywire with some of the budget issues. So just as an example, this is intended to kickstart volleyball programming so that we can have a lot of volleyball league and team play in the county. We have about 6,000 kids playing basketball today. And one of the things that we see is that after about the age of 10, the genders begin to divide on a sport like that. And unfortunately, girls begin to play less. And we should provide sports opportunities that run the gamut, and we need to have every sport covered because we want to have sports that everybody loves to play. And volleyball is one of the most popular girls' sports anywhere. You know, if you look at states that offer volleyball programming, they are really heavily utilized. So we should have volleyball. We've got lacrosse, you know, programming that's helping to reach across divides. The idea that sports is really left to the family to provide, you know, that's kind of the old Montgomery County. And I think in our age, we have to be more intentional about ensuring that those doors are open and that we're offering services and that it's affordable and it's present in the community. So this appropriation is intended to help with equity in sports for girls, but also racial and geographic equity. And we know that our department will do a marvelous job of implementing it. This is funding to get us to July 1st, and we anticipate annualizing the funding in the budget. And we will look at tennis too. We are not, you know, the list is not exclusionary, and you know we want to grow all these programs. But I want to thank the council president. He's made sports a big theme in his time here, and it has been really powerful. And I was reflecting on Mr. Wagner's comments. You know, years ago there was a capital budget item that intended to build really high quality turf fields for the East County. And unfortunately that capital budget item was deleted from the school's capital budget. But the experience that you see with really high quality fields, you know, that aren't equitably distributed around the county is a glaring problem. And we need to address that. And today's appropriation isn't about fields, but Councilmember Albornoz and many of us are concerned about sports access. And I hope we can, you know, address those kinds of issues in time. And the legislation that you introduced last week, I think, is going to be a big part of that. So I look forward to continuing this work with you together. And thanks to everyone for their support. And Councilmember Rice's comments were right on the money as well.
Great. So this has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry about that. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much. Well, I am so enthusiastic about this particular appropriation. Obviously, we understand the very important role that sports play in the lives of girls and young women. I do want to ask the question that Ms. Ingram brought up regarding tennis. My husband is a great tennis player. I am not very good at tennis whatsoever, but in this particular appropriation, though, it is very specific about which sports it will go to, you know. So it does state that it's volleyball, softball, and lacrosse with introductory activities and instructional skill classes and clinics with the goal of establishing countywide recreation leagues, etc. Also talks about soccer for change. So I was just curious in terms of
it's a good question.
Our recreation
I can respond.
folks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how can we enhance and also include access to tennis?
Absolutely. So I can respond to that because I'm uniquely qualified to be able to answer that question.
You sure are.
So all of the programs that have been added within the special appropriation are already programs that the Department of Recreation facilitates and manages, either directly themselves or through contracts. Tennis programs fall under the Parks Department, and there is a longstanding MOU between Park and Planning and Recreation that Recreation will not offer tennis programs. This candidly was a little frustrating for a few years. It's something that we will need to work out in a special appropriation specifically to the Rec Department. But what I would suggest is we come back to this, because I agree with you, and see as we discuss, and we've got our lead for Parks here, to see what we can do to appropriate within the Parks Division to enhance their efforts to conduct further outreach and level the tennis court playing field there as well.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I think that count me in to work with the lead and whoever else here to make that happen. It is absolutely, I think, very necessary, and and it's something that I've heard for a long time as well. If we're going to talk about equity, then we need to be comprehensive in that approach, and notwithstanding all the logistics that stand in the way. But I think working with our Parks Department to see if we can then go ahead and expand, that would be awesome. And
I agree.
that's just an answer to Ms. Ingram.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say I'm committed to working on that as well, and look forward to working with colleagues so we can make it happen.
Golf and tennis, I hear my colleague here bring up, so we'll work on that.
And that's, of course, the Revenue Authority, which we can get to.
I've played golf with Councilmember Rice. He's not a great golfer, but he's pretty good.
Yeah. But we digress. All right. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I believe, Councilmember Rice, you wanted a second? Yes. Okay, seconded by Councilmember Rice. I'll just say one last comment about this. It does dovetail nicely with the Sports Commission, which we are going to launch to look at the full, angles of what's out there and where the holes are, and address the sports equity issues. So, all right, all those in favor of this special appropriation, please raise your hands. All right, that is unanimous among all those present. I don't believe Councilmember Giwando has joined us yet. And colleagues, I apologize. I neglected for item number 10, so let's go back to item number 10. We had the public hearing, we did close it, but we did not take the formal action, it appears. So can I get a motion to accept the special appropriation of $2,109,404 for the county government's FY22 operating budget for the Department of Health and Human Services?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Katz, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present as well. Okay, that is it for our public hearings. Thank you all. That actually worked out pretty well. We now move on to item number 12, which is a work session regarding the FY23 through 28 capital improvement program, and specifically transportation. Thank you, Director Conklin, for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to the chair of our T&E committee, Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'll be very brief because a lot of work has already gone into this, and I think it's a very big and impactful CIP, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to discuss it. Thank you so much, certainly to Director Conklin and the County Executive for sending us a good CIP that really makes really important transportation investments, and to Dr. Orlin, as usual, for a fantastic packet that broke it all down for us. The committee made a lot of recommendations that are going to improve transportation access and safety across all modes of transportation for Montgomery County residents, and we made a number of recommendations that will bring additional revenue and infrastructure investments in infrastructure to our equity emphasis areas and communities that need new pedestrian and cyclist pathways and improved and enhanced bus service and other things like that. This is also going to be a CIP that's very impactful on our climate goals because it imagines investing a lot of funding into electrifying our bus fleet, which we've been talking about for many years, and is part of their climate action plan. And this is the CIP in which we're going to really put where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And the T&E committee, I was very glad, unanimously supported a proposal that I suggested to add about $4 million to our pedestrian safety program. We are not making progress nearly fast enough toward our Vision Zero goals, and so spending some additional money on crosswalks and pedestrian safety audits, hawk signals, other enhancements like that to protect our pedestrians is really critical as well, and a goal that I know we all share. So with that, Mr. President, I'll turn it back to you. Dr. Orland can walk us through the packet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Orland.
Thank you. I think what I'll do is, because this is so much stuff in here, that I'll just hit the highlights in terms of changes the committee made to the executive's recommendation, but also highlight those items where the committee agree with the executive on the larger proposals. Just as an overview, though, I want to point out that the committee did, in its summary of its recommendations, has added $104 million over the executive's recommendation for transportation. And I'll just have to say, we're going to go through a reconciliation process here in the next few weeks, and it's likely that some of this is going to have to be cut back some and deferred. But still, the idea is that to move forward in a large way in transportation. Excuse me. So with that, going to the body of the packet, the first two categories, the bridge program and the highway maintenance program, basically the committee entirely agrees with the executive. And most of the changes are really relatively minor. On the highway maintenance side, there is some more money for residential resurfacing, particularly in the latter years of the CIP, and also for sidewalk and curb replacement. We're already on page 7. Go to the road program. The first item of note is North High Street Extended. This is a very small project in Olney. It was requested actually originally by Councilmember Leventhal at behest of GOCA 4 years ago. And what it does is extend an existing street probably less than 100 feet so that it intersects with another road, Morningwood Road in Olney, to provide better circulation around the center of Olney. Also extends the sidewalk in that area as well. It's a very inexpensive project. It's only $2.2 million. Sorry? Page 9. I'm going very quick. If there's something, I should say, maybe I should do this by consent. If there's any comments that people want to make about the bridge or highway maintenance programs before I move on to roads. If not, I'll
just keep saying where you are in the document. That's all I would ask,
all right.
Please.
I'm sort of sensitive to the fact that we're somewhat behind. So again, on page 9, North High Street, so it's an extension of an existing street, provides better circulation only. It's something that GOCA has requested. Councilmember Navarro has written in support of it as well. And the committee is recommending approval of it so that it would go into design this next year and be completed in 3 years. The next project is Observation Drive Extended in Germantown and Clarksburg. This is a very large project in terms of cost and length. It's in 2 phases. The first phase runs from the north end of Germantown to Old Baltimore Road and north to Little Seneca Parkway, and creates a 4-lane road through that area, and then along Little Seneca Parkway back up to Route 355. It also provides for a continuous bikeway, a side path, and sidewalk through that entire area. The second phase runs from Little Seneca Parkway up to Stringtown Road. What the committee is recommending here, and Mr. Rice has attended the work session and proposed this as well, is to accelerate the first phase by 1 year. To be able to complete it a year sooner, but to decelerate the second phase by a couple of years. That has the net result of actually reducing the amount of money in the 6-year CIP compared to the executives by about $3 million, but it gets the most important piece of Observation Drive in more quickly. The next project is of note is Summit Avenue Extended in Kensington. This is a project that was first identified in the Kensington sector plan 10 years ago. And it's been facility planning for a number of years, and it's now ready to become a full-fledged project in the CIP. What this does is it extends Summit Avenue from Pliers Mill Road along the basically the back northwest side of Kensington, and it connects with University Boulevard and Connecticut Avenue at the north end of Kensington. And what it will do is relieve a lot of congestion that's existed for many, many years on Connecticut Avenue at the intersections of Pliers Mill Road and Knowles Avenue. It also includes a continuous sidewalk and bikeway through that section. The town of Kensington, of course, very much supports this and has since the sector plan 10 years ago. And Mr. Friedson has written in support of this as well. In acknowledgement of the fact that this is an expensive project, the committee's recommendation, Mr. Friedson's recommendation as well, is to delay the start of design until FY25. So it wouldn't start until then. It wouldn't be completed, I believe, until FY29. That's it for the road projects.
Let's pause there really quickly, colleagues.
Sure.
Did you want to make any comments regarding any of the projects thus far? Nope. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, the next are the traffic engineering program projects. Excuse me. The first one that Mr. Hucker had noted was the pedestrian safety program. Here, the executive had actually recommended adding $200,000 a year each year to the existing program, which partly closes sidewalk gaps in areas around schools, within walksheds of schools. Mr. Giwando had proposed increasing that amount by another $300,000 a year for each of the 6 years. And then in the committee, when they took it up, added another $500,000 per year on top of that, starting in FY24. So the net increase over the executive is $300,000 in FY23 and $800,000 per year in FY24 through FY28. So it's a large increase. And again, it's the idea is this is all would be dedicated, all the increase would be dedicated to closing these sidewalk gaps in the vicinity of schools. Really, that's the only other major project in the traffic engineering section. Then we get to the mass transit program project, starting on page 14. I do want to point out that the metro station south entrance in Bethesda, the cost has gone up by $20 million. And this has to do with an estimate that was made by MTA several years ago, which didn't take full account of the cost of the mezzanine at the metro level. And this is effectively a placeholder of $20 million. We're not quite really sure what it's going to cost. WMATA is reviewing it now, and they're going to come back with an estimate probably within the year. And so we may be back here again next year when we approve the CIP, the amended CIP to adjust this number. I don't know whether it's going to be up or down. But the idea is that this station still has to be done in time for the Purple Line, and it will be. The schedule for this, we'll have it done in time for the new schedule for the Purple Line. There is a new project, actually not, is new in terms of a 6-year program, the bottom page 14, the Bus Priority Program, minor projects. The executive recommended this last year just for 1 year worth of work in FY22, and this is to basically provide means for providing better bus accessibility and travel time in spots. It's like a spot improvement program for bus travel. There are a couple of projects already either finished or underway. In Germantown, for example, around the Germantown Transit Center, that work is done. There soon will be work on Veersmill Road coming into Wheaton to improve the bus service coming into Wheaton to the Wheaton Metro Station. And there will be, when it's all worked out, improvement along Colesville Road as well that I know Mr. Glass was interested in last year and still is interested in. The proposal this year is that be now a regular 6-year program, and it's funded for $500,000 in FY23 and FY24, rising to $1 million a year from that point on. The next one on page 15 is
Councilmember Hucker.
the biggie.
Thanks. Just while we're still on that, I believe I forgot to ask during the committee, the Burtonsville Park and Ride improvements, that was state aid. Our
Yes.
great D14 delegation won a couple of years ago now. Why is that stuck for a project that the community's been waiting for 10 years at least?
Right. There was a grant to do the study of the design of that expansion of the parking there. And in the committee work session, Mr. Conklin went to talk about some more. Basically, was deferring work on the start of that study until the developer was identified.
Yeah. Mr. Hucker, there's a couple elements that would lead to the need for that parking garage. One is the growth in ridership on the Flash system, which we fully anticipate. The second is the reconfiguration of that park and ride lot for some other development use. We can start that work at any time But we're not seeing the pressure on the park and ride for its own purposes right now. And the executive, working with the Department of General Services, is still working on a potential developer selection for that site. So we were deferring starting that study until we knew the outcome of that effort.
When Director Conklin, do you think that will happen, since there's, I understand, just one developer that's bid on the opportunity?
I can't really speak to where that stands with the executive and the development entity and DGS evaluating that proposal, but I would imagine they would reach a conclusion on that in a relatively short time frame, one way or the other.
Yeah, I think it's too late for a short timeline. But yes, I mean, if there's only one developer that wants to move forward, I get requests from the community all the time to find out what's happening with that, just like the shopping center across the street. So
right.
This is the one we're completely in control of. So,
and to your point, in the grant language from the legislature last year, we had included some other potential uses of these funds for Old Columbia Pike improvements and things like that if it turns out the parking facility isn't needed in the near term.
Right. Yeah, I just hope we can move forward as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Okay. With that, we're at the top of page 15, and this is one of the two large additions that the executive is recommending to the transportation portion of the CIP. This is actually then the design and construction of the entire Viersmill Road BRT from Wheaton to Rockville, and actually continuing up to Montgomery College in Rockville, and then designing and constructing the middle piece of the Maryland 355 BRT, extending what I just described up to Montgomery College in Germantown. The cost of that project is actually between the two projects is close to it's actually over $400 million. The increased funding, however, is entirely excuse me, between anticipated federal aid, because both those projects are on a federal track in terms of getting eligibility, as well as using $170 million in money coming from the Opportunity Lane toll lanes on I-270 in the western part of the Beltway. The $170 million, the way that number was calculated, we are to get $60 million within the next year at financial close for Phase 1 south of the Opportunity Lanes, and then $300 million over the subsequent decades in an annual amount. The executive is assuming we're going to get $6 million a year over 50 years, and if you do a net present value of that, that ends up being about $109 million. So the total between the 60 and that is $170 million. And so between those two, that would fund the increase in those two projects. Furthermore, the executive is recommending spending almost $10 million with that op lane money for completing the design of the 355 BRT from the Montgomery College in Germantown up to Clarksburg, and also from the Rockville Metro Station down to Bethesda, so that in 2 years, when that design is finished, it will be eligible for federal funding through the federal track, and we can apply for that time to try to complete that. And as you heard this morning from the Corridor Forward discussion, that is the top priority in Corridor Forward, is to get both the Viersmill Road BRT and the entire 325 BRT completed. The committee unanimously concurred with that. The only point I'm making here, which is just a sort of an additional point, if we were able to assume a slightly less conservative discount rate, the executive assumed a 5% discount rate for that $300 million, and if the payback were to be sooner than 50 years, let's say it was 40 years or 45 years, there would be enough money to actually fund another project, and we'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about the possibility of using that money for the White Flint North Metro Station access. The next project on page 16 is the other big addition that the executive is recommending, which Mr. Hucker referred to as well, which is to basically make all of the bus acquisitions we do in the future for ride-on zero-emission buses. That increases the amount over the approved CIP by $56 million. It's about a 57% increase in the funding for that program, strictly to buy effectively electric buses instead of diesel buses. We actually started that trend last year. You recall the executive recommended some amount of buses being paid for that would be electric, and the council upped that a bit as well. But this would make it the entire fleet from now on being electric. And the electric buses, or the zero-emission buses, cost a little more than twice as much as the diesel buses that we've been acquiring over the years.
The only thing I'd like to mention is we're focused on zero-emission buses. We may be pursuing other fuel sources like hydrogen generated on-site or from landfill waste gas recovery. Those proposals are still in development, and the fuel mix might better match some of our current route structure where the battery electric buses don't quite have the running range that we need for some of our routes. So we're not committed entirely to electric, but yes to zero emission.
I stand corrected. That's true. The next project.
Councilmember Rice has a thought on that. Sorry.
I just had a real quick question because I know that our school system has embarked on the largest purchase in the nation for electric buses. And so I'm curious as to how that may tie in with what it is we do here. It also ties into another question I have around Bus Depot. And if, in fact, there are some possible shared uses that may result. But I'm just curious because I was on with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy last week, and we were talking about their energy goals and about some of the support that the White House is looking to give to local jurisdictions. And so I'm curious if we've explored and had those kinds of conversations around some of those offsets. They're looking to set examples throughout the nation of localities that are embarking on this new trend of more greener mass transit infrastructure. So if you could just weigh in on that, because I think it's really important to talk about future proofing for our system.
I'm very happy to do that. I appreciate your questions. In terms of the school bus system, it's a little bit different than the transit bus program because those buses sit at night, sit in the middle of the day, and sit in the summer. So there's some ability to leverage the energy storage capacity in the bus to backfill the grid during peak usage times. So the financing of that is a little bit easier than the transit buses, which are on the road much of the time and don't really have that energy storage option in terms of the financial structure. Some other elements, though, are the same. The low emission, no emission grant program was one of the competitive grant programs in the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that had a very, very significant funding increase. And that's the type of program that's perfectly geared towards the zero emission implementation by the county. In this particular cycle, the applications are due, I think, April 15th. So a few weeks from now, we will be applying for the on-site hydrogen generation at the Gaithersburg Bus Depot to begin piloting the hydrogen fuel because we think that is going to work better in some of our transit applications and pursue those models for grant support for the cost differentials here. The other element is the infrastructure investment for the electric vehicles is higher than it is for diesel or natural gas where that's already in place. So our partners in General Services did the really creative P3 project at the Brookville Depot last year where we're paying for the infrastructure through the energy savings over time of that. So that's one way in which we're leveraging the electric vehicles without that additional cost delta for the infrastructure. This program looks to fill that up so that it's as economical as possible first, while doing a small deployment of electric buses at the Gaithersburg Depot and then working on that program probably, at least in our current planning, a mix of hydrogen and electric fuel. You asked about depots, and there is an important element there. We do have a leased facility, our Nicholson Court Depot, that really doesn't support transition to another fuel source very easily. So we are working on a depot replacement plan with that and are talking with WMATA and MCPS about any co-location opportunities for that. So those are all things that we have underway, and Maricela Cordova, who's not here today, is leading the zero emission bus transition plan, which sounds simple, but it's a really significant undertaking because it also affects the routing and service patterns on the street.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
All right, the next project of note is the bottom of page 16 is the White Flint Metro Station northern entrance. This project is currently funded at 25% of the ultimate cost of that entrance, and we're only talking here about creating a mezzanine at the north end of the current station, so it's the southeast corner of Rockville Pike and Old Georgetown Road. It does not include underpasses under the Pike to either the northwest or northeast or southwest quadrants. The executive is recommending deferring it by 1 year because there still isn't an obvious partner to come up with the other 75% of the cost. There is some work to hopefully get the developer on the WMATA site to help pay for this, but nothing's been resolved yet. Mr. Friedson had recommended actually funding the entire project and starting in at design FY23. And I pointed out again a little bit earlier in this presentation that there may be the possibility of getting the op lanes money a little bit earlier and getting basically more of it as a result, which might make up the difference. But we should have a better idea as to whether or not that is possible in the next few weeks. So the committee took a pass on this particular project for now. We'll revisit it during the operating budget, and we'll be coming back to it.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a brief note. I think I may have this right, so I'll try to be gentle in my wording here. But JLL just did a study of the White Flint site. Councilmember Friedson probably knows this all pretty detailed. And they concluded that development at that site would only be viable if the county were to create a pad-ready development opportunity. In other words, do all the construction work up to the point where you begin to put the building above the ground, and that was a substantial expense, tens of millions of dollars. So I just want to observe that the possibility of having a development project that pays for station infrastructure there, I don't know how realistic that is in light of the fact that our own consultant has said the county would have to spend tens of millions of dollars to get this site to the point where it would be viable for private development. So just wanted to share that around. It's a recent analysis of development at Metro and a development at this site. And I think it bears on the likely need for us to fund this project through other means if we want to see it happen. I think that's probably the underlying emphasis there. So thanks.
Okay. The next projects I'll note on page 18 are the series of bicycle pedestrian priority area improvements. We call them BIPA improvements. This was actually initiated by Councilmember Reamer several years ago. And there are 4 different projects for this in the CIP. The first one is sort of a general BIPA. It covers Silver Spring, Glenmont, and a couple of other areas that the executive is recommending an increase of about 17% in the program. And you see the table on top of page 18 shows the sub-projects and when they're expected to be completed. The second one is the BIPA along the Purple Line, and this is really for areas such as Long Branch and Tacoma Langley and Littonsville. And you see the projects listed there. Here, Councilmember Glass recommended accelerating 3 of these sub-projects, one case by 2 years and 2 other cases by 1 year, to try to get those projects done a bit sooner. That doesn't actually add any cost to the CIP. It does put some of the money a bit sooner in the CIP than the 6 years, but it doesn't add funds to it. I didn't know if Mr. Glass wanted to make a comment about it or not.
Excuse me. Yeah, so the reason I asked for those accelerated projects, one, I appreciate you noting, Dr. Orland, that they did not change the fiscal impact of the overall CIP. But as the Purple Line continues to languish in its construction, I know we all hear from constituents who are trying to just simply walk around their neighborhood and walk to the grocery store, and it is causing problems. And so having these projects accelerated will provide more pedestrian safety for them and their neighbors. And thank you.
Okay. The next
Councilmember
project.
Reamer, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank my colleagues for support on the BIPA projects. This has been a terrific funding strategy, and it's been growing over the years. And the enhancement to the vision of funding specific projects in the Purple Line area, I think, is absolutely essential to the success of the Purple Line, and making that corridor walkable and bikeable is going to be a absolute crucial element of the Purple Line's success for this community. So I'm glad to see that, and including the Veers Mill Randolph intersection, which I think you might be about to get to. But personally, that was one of the intersections that inspired the creation of the BIPA program in the first place. It's a place that is teeming with people, and yet has not been really recognized by the county sufficiently, and has an outdated suburban, auto-oriented design, and yet is used in a very urbanized way, with people crossing to and fro, from residences to buildings to transportation. And so making some significant improvements there is a really necessary step. So I'm glad to see so many BIPA projects, and look forward to seeing this continue to grow. We've got Wheaton CBD as well. And again, want to express appreciation and excitement about these initiatives. Thank you.
The next project is the Veers Mill Randolph BIP on page 19. Here, there's a very, very large increase. It's almost a 350% increase in the funding of this program. The reason for this, basically what this does is build out the rest of the BIP improvements in this entire area of Veers Mill Road, both not just at the intersection of Randolph, but also up and down Veers Mill Road nearby. The reason why this has been heavied up, if you will, is because of the Veers Mill Road BRT being on the federal track to be funded with a lot of federal funds. DOT's idea is that they can move these projects into that same application and get 50% federal funding for these. That's the anticipation. And so the timing on these projects are timed to the construction of the Veers Mill Road BRT as well. So you see some are done sooner than later.
I'll just note very quickly on these projects, this is very much in line with Vision Zero. Council Vice President Glass hosted a event right on that intersection where somebody had just passed away a few days before, and the Recreation Department's headquarters is a block away from that corner, and there have been multiple fatalities in that intersection and in that general vicinity over the last 11 years. So this is exciting because it does really address a number of those walkability issues as well that are critical to achieving Vision Zero. Councilmember Navarro. Sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. I very much appreciate also this creative way of figuring out how to actually make the dollars go further. This is wonderful because we know most of the time it's an issue and a challenge regarding resources. But definitely when I look at this entire list, I mean, these are high priority areas given all of the different kinds of fatalities as well as crashes that have occurred there. And no doubt is aligned with all of our, goals of Vision Zero, equity, emphasis areas, everything. So just truly wanted to elevate that and to thank, the committee for really, truly, honing in on these very important projects. I know the community would be very pleased to know that these are indeed included, and that hopefully we will start seeing some extraordinary improvements with regards to protection to our pedestrians and to the community, in general. So just want to thank you for that.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. I just wanted to expand on that point. So as staff mentioned, what is before us is a unified strategy of funding BRT and pedestrian improvements. And it is unified insofar as they've taken these projects that were BIPA projects in the past, and they've taken them to the full scale of what they need to be. And they've rolled them into the Veers Mill Corridor funding project, N355. And by combining the BIPAs with the BRT, the whole package has become large enough to be eligible for federal funding. And so the anticipated funding strategy is about half from the opportunities lanes, half from a federal grant, which we will be pursuing. So this is the first time a mega project like this has been in our county budget in a really long time. It's exciting, and it's gratifying to see such a concern from the grassroots factored into this intentionally and saying we're meeting crucial equity safety goals at the same time as we're meeting mega transit project goals. It all kind of comes together here. Chris,
You've
would you like to expand
summarized
on-
it correctly, and we are having monthly meetings with the Federal Transit Administration
As
about
part
this
of-
grant and this approach to make sure that we're all headed in the same direction and hopefully have a favorable report and eventual award of a small starts grant on this quarter.
Small starts grant. And a small starts grant is typically, what's the size range on those grants?
They're usually in the $100 million or so range. The cap is $300 million on those. Our other project is nearly in that range, but not quite. It's a little bit larger, so that's in a different capital grant program that we're also in those same conversations with Federal Transit Administration, getting that project close to ready to enter into that program.
So we have a $300 million plus project in our capital budget, anticipated to be funded substantially through that, as well as through the Opportunity Lanes revenue. And it all kind of comes together in that way. So, thank you.
Thank
the
you.
last, I'm sorry. The last BIPA project is the one for the Wheaton CBD. It's almost doubled in terms of cost as well, mainly associated with including the Amherst Avenue cycle track, which we reviewed actually last year and is now ready to go in CIP, as well as several other projects which are listed at the top of page 20. The next project I want to highlight is middle of page 20, the Bowie Mill Road Bikeway. This is a long project, 3.3 miles. The executive had recommended keeping it on the schedule. That was the improved CIP. However, late in this season, we got a letter from GOCA requesting that it be rapidly accelerated. It can't be as accelerated, physically can't be accelerated as fast as they would like, but what the committee has recommended is to accelerate the entire schedule, design, land acquisition, and construction by 1 year. So rather than starting design in FY24 and finishing the project in FY29, it would be started, design would be started next year, FY23, and be finished in FY28. The next project on page 20 is the Big Kahuna, the Capitol Crescent Trail, which the executive was once again recommending not funding the tunnel in Bethesda within the 6-year program. Like last year when the council added it back in, this is going to be a heavy lift. It's going to be actually a heavier lift this year to put it back in, because now all 3 years of construction will be within the 6-year program. And not only that, it'll be in years 3, 4, and 5 if we're not to delay the project. And for the project to be finished in time for the Purple Line, it would need to be in years 3, 4, and 5. And so it's $55 million that we would have to find to be able to keep that project in. And that's the bulk of the majority of the committee's recommendation over the executive is basically to keep this project just on schedule. And I believe DOT is looking at the possibility of a federal grant that might help, but the chances of that are relatively small.
Well, we're preparing a RAISE grant application for this project, also due April 15th, 14th. So same time you have to do your taxes, we have to submit these applications. The maximum award under that program is about $25 million. But the probability of award is not all that high. There are thousands of applications, so we have to keep our hopes in check on what might be delivered with that, but we are pursuing that funding that fills a gap that was in the previously approved CIP.
Right. The next project I want to highlight is
Councilmember Reamer.
Okay, you're applying for a RAISE grant for this project. Do you have a current expectation of the cost benefit for that grant?
Excuse me. So we completed our first draft of cost benefit analysis yesterday, and it rated at 1.5, which we felt was very strong. We actually had a meeting this morning where we are a member of Transportation for America, and we have them evaluating our application to help make it stronger. And really that the benefits are primarily based on safety. So the entire focus of our application, while we're speaking to connecting communities and transit, the real focus of the benefits is on safety. And we'll speak to all of the other assets of completing the project, but what we have right now. Although the competition is very strong, we are confident that our application is strong within the realm of many people seeking that same funding.
Okay.
The next project I want to highlight is the Fenton Street cycle track. Just that the cost of this is actually more than doubled in the last year, but basically improvements have been made to meet the requirements of the residents of the area, and the project has now gotten pretty good community support, and it's still on schedule for completion FY24. And actually, the Fenton Street cycle track, we'll actually talk about this in Fed Committee on Monday next week. We talk about the Silver Spring Plan. Actually, what's being planned here is the first leg, if you will, of the central green loop idea in the Silver Spring CBD plan. Next project is the Forest Glen Passageway. This is the underpass that would go from the Forest Glen Metro Station to the northeast corner of Georgia Avenue and Forest Glen Road. The executive is recommending delaying it by 1 year, and the committee is recommending no, keep it on current schedule. So it would be completed in FY27 rather than FY28 as recommended by the executive. I'm going to skip down to on page 22 to the project number 16, the 355 Clarksburg Shared Use Path. The only reason why I'm highlighting this is one of the very few places you'll find in the transportation CIP where the project's being done a lot sooner than what had been approved CIP. Basically, the county got a grant from the state to be able to accelerate this project, and it'll be finished a couple of years sooner than what it would otherwise have been. A $3.5 million grant. On page 23, the top of the page, page 18, this is a new project. The state will be largely designing and building the remaining section of the Bikeway along Route 108 in the Almeida Sandy Spring area. However, there is a cost-sharing agreement with the county where the county will put up $200,000 towards the design of that project. The state will pick up the tab for the rest. And the idea is the project itself will be finished by FY26. The Seven Locks Road Bikeway and safety improvements. This is the Methuselah of projects in the Montgomery County Transportation Program. It's been around for a very long time. This would be safety improvements and some bikeway and sidewalk improvements and safety improvements on Seven Locks Road from Montrose Road all the way down to Democracy Boulevard. And it's in 3 phases. The only phase that's ever been funded is the first phase, which is the northern piece from Montrose down to Tuckerman. However, 2 years ago, the council decided to defer this project to beyond 6 years and to basically have a refresh of this project, try to look at it differently and come up with a different maybe concept that would reduce the cost, make it more affordable. Mr. Friedson recommended actually putting some money in years 5 and 6 of the CIP, FY27-28. However, the committee felt like we should wait for that study to be done, and perhaps in the next CIP, or maybe as an amendment next year, depending on when the work is done, look at trying to put this project back in, at least to some degree, and maybe even sooner than FY27. The next project to talk about really, I believe, is the Tuckerman Lane Sidewalk on top page 24. This is a project that's been through in the facility planning program for a number of years. This is, again, a very long project that ultimately would run all the way from the Grosvenor Metro Station, from Old Georgetown Road over to Falls Road. The T&E committee said to concentrate on the western half of this piece a couple of years ago, segments 1 and 2, which would be from Falls Road over to Seven Locks Road. And what the executive has done, now the facility planning is done, is to say, well, the most important piece is a very short segment of sidewalk near the Churchill High School and Hoover Middle School. And so he's recommending programming that for construction in FY27 and 28, the last 2 years of the CIP. Mr. Friedson recommended, and the committee agreed, to fund the beginning of the design, at least, for all of segments 1 and 2, starting again in FY27. So you'll see that in the table on the bottom, towards the bottom of page 24, that the committee's recommendation is for $1.1 million roughly in FY27 and about the same amount in FY28 to complete the design for both segments 1 and 2. The idea that then land acquisition and construction on the rest of the project would occur in the years beyond FY28. But the executive's short piece of construction would still be included in the years that he's recommending. The next one is going to be complicated. This is called the WABA proposal. This is on page 25. You might recall from the public hearing testimony that the Washington Area Bicycle Association put forward a program to build 47 bikeway projects in 4 equity focus areas over the next 6 years. And they had estimated the cost at being $110 million. The 4 areas being Wheaton, Silver Spring, Wheaton CBD, Silver Spring CBD, Langley Park, and White Oak. The 4 areas being Silver Spring CBD, Wheaton CBD, Langley Park, and White Oak. We asked DOT to basically look at the costs, look at that list of projects they're recommending, and to ask, well, how many of these projects are actually already being recommended, being funded for design and construction? And the answer was that 11 of them were. So that left 36 projects left to do in this program if you wanted to do all of them. Based on those 11 projects, however, the cost estimate that WABA had used, which was from the 2018 Bicycle Master Plan, was the costs were like 85% higher than that. So that ended up being a cost to actually build out the rest of the 36 projects to be about $110 million. There was a little bit of back and forth. Mr. Reamer made an original proposal. I made a counter proposal. He changed the proposal again. So what you see in the packet is Mr. Reamer's final proposal, which the committee agreed to, and I have mine in there too, which is a little bit more modest. But his proposal, which the committee agreed to, is to program funds for facility planning for the Cherry Hill Road Bikeway in White Oak in the next 2 fiscal years, FY23 and 24. The cost of that is estimated to be $1.25 million. And for those of you paying close attention on the committee, that's actually a smaller number than what you saw in the committee meeting. We had asked DOT to go back and do a more careful estimate of that, and they came back with this lower number. So that's a gain of about $800,000 from what you thought it was. They would also, the proposal also would design and construct 6 neighborhood greenway projects in the first 4 years of the CIP, FY23 through 26. Cost of that is estimated to be $4.7 million, and this gets spread out. This would be allocated according to 3 different BIPA projects we mentioned earlier. There's projects in Wheaton, there's a project in Silver Spring, there's some projects in Langley Park. And finally, Mr. Reamer's proposal, again, the committee recommended agreeing with, would add $500,000 to the general facility planning program for bikeways in FY23, $750,000 more annually in FY24 and FY25 and FY26, and $1 million more annually in FY27 and 28 to do the facility planning over a staggered period of time for the remaining 29 bikeway projects. You remember the first, maybe I didn't say this, the Cherry Hill Road Bikeway and the 7 neighborhood greenways, that's there's 6 of them. That's 7 of the 36. That leaves you 29. So this gets started on the remaining 29, and so that it ends up being a total of $10,700,000 over the 6-year period. My recommendations there also, it's a little bit more modest, but it's the same general direction. But the committee's recommendation is Mr. Reamer's.
Councilmember Reamer.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues on the committee for supporting this recommendation, and I want to thank WABA for doing a lot of work over the past year or two to scope out a bold step forward in our bike planning. I want to thank the council, and I thank Councilmember Nancy Navarro for her emphasis on equity. I think it's reflected in this strategy, which is to build out infrastructure where maybe it hasn't been the traditional approach to bike facilities. And it's recognizing there is a real need for bike facilities in communities like Wheaton or Langley Park, White Oak. Silver Spring. And what's exciting about this is that we can really bring the infrastructure in those areas to a very high level at a cost level that is not, it's not out of reach, actually. I mean, this isn't the whole amount that we need to have funded, but I think when you look at all of it together, it is feasible for us to do this through our local dollars, and maybe we can find grant dollars and state dollars for pieces of it. But I want to give a special shout out to Peter Gray and Dave Helms and other folks at WABA for doing the hard work to conceive of this, and I urge our council to support this, and I'm excited to see it in here. Thank you.
Okay, the next section.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Councilmember Rice.
Just very quickly, and as we had the previous conversation around encouraging many of our communities of color to be more engaged and involved in sports, the same thing applies to bicycling. And I think that it's important for us as we build these resources to also spend the time in outreaching to the community to make sure that we're connecting them. One of the things that I thought was a huge success was when we invested in the trails and seeing the Parks Department really focus on, and they bought additional bikes to help to make sure that especially our children of color were able to utilize these great trails that we have and set up a specialized program. I think that through a number of the initiatives that I've seen with the county government that have talked about teaching folks about bicycling, we can't assume that everybody rides bicycle and knows how to ride a bicycle any longer. It's not, especially in our communities of color. And so it is one in which, if we're going to say that this is provided as an option to individuals, we also have to invest in making sure that we're giving them the tools that they're able to utilize these great amenities that we're investing a lot of money in. And so we can't just assume that these things will happen. We have to be intentional about making sure that it happens. So I just want to put that out there. I think it's great in terms of us providing these options that are affordable options, that are healthy options for folks. But I also think we have to be really intentional about how we outreach to those individuals as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Orland?
Okay, thank you. Then we have the facility planning project. This is the gatekeeper for projects in this transportation portion of the CIP. For years, we've had a facility planning transportation PDF, which covers roads, mass transit projects, and ped bike projects. The executive this year is recommending splitting out the mass transit projects to a separate facility planning mass transit program. It's for transparency, frankly. The committee's recommendation is actually split out the remaining part of the facility planning transportation into two pieces: facility planning roads and facility planning ped bikes. So you have the total transparency in that respect. In terms of individual projects, the executive is recommending adding 4 projects to the program. I believe they're all ped bike projects for the most part. One is Shady Grove bike ped safety improvements in the area around Shady Grove Road and Darnestown Road, from Darnestown Road to Mid-County Highway. One is the Great Seneca shared use path from Key West Avenue to Darnestown Road. One is basically improvements, bike ped improvements around the Germantown Mark Station, and one is a Grosvenor Lane side path from Cheshire Drive to Route 55. In addition to that, you might recall last year Councilmember Jawando had recommended adding facility planning funding for Norwood Road sidewalk and bikeway between New Hampshire Avenue and Norbeck Road, basically in front of Blake High School and other facilities along that road. The committee is agreeing to fund that now, again for facility planning in years 3 and 4 of the CIP for a total of $750,000. And all of these projects, the 4 new ones, as well as the one Mr. Jawando is suggesting, we go into the new facility planning ped bike PDF. And finally, there's also a new program the executive is recommending called Transportation Feasibility Studies, which are basically generic, smaller and generic studies that don't need to have a full-blown facility planning study. So he's recommending that as well. And then just the final page of the packet, page 28, there's some other issues that were raised by the planning board, which we addressed. One, they made a proposal to actually add bike racks at libraries and rec centers and at MCPS. But it was pointed out that those really on-site improvements and really need to be, it's not DOT's province to provide those. It's really up to MCPS, the Department of Libraries, Department of Recreation to do that. And we encourage the council, when you're reviewing those CIPs, to look at the needs there. And their other recommendation has to do with the Aspen Hill Vision Zero improvements. And the committee's recommendation there is to basically have DOT take them under advisement and try to prioritize them along with all the other Vision Zero improvements around the county to see where they would fit in. And that concludes my report.
Great. Wonderful job, Dr. Orlin. Mr. Conklin, did you want to add anything or make any comments as we wrap up?
The only thing that I would add is that we're very excited about the two major areas of increase in this recommended CIP, and that also reflects the committee's additions, which are the mass transit projects, which we're very excited to see the potential to get those moving. And then secondly, the pedestrian and bike improvements, which are the other area where there's significant expansion. And as Councilmember Reamer noted, having those things sync up in time and in implementation is a change in approach for us. We had been trying to manage them on a fiscal basis rather than on a functional basis, and I think that's a good step forward for the Veers Mill corridor in particular. So thanks to the committee for their work on this, and look forward to council's action on these recommendations.
Great. Great job by the committee. Great job by the staff. Thank you all. All right, colleagues, that moves us on to the final item on the...
President.
Oh, sorry. Got to move it.
Committee recommendation.
Oh, and Councilmember Jawando, I think, wanted to speak. Councilmember Jawando?
Yes, if I could briefly, thank you. Just on the facilities planning issue, appreciate Dr. Orlin raising it. Also appreciate the committee's action to approve it. Unfortunately, this continues to be an issue that we're confronting on many of our roadways, and there was just a story actually this week in the Post, or today, actually, that we've had 3 students struck by vehicles in the last 2 months while walking to school. And Norwood Road is one of many examples, but it's an extreme one where there's a lot of students that are walking up and down that road. And while this is facilities planning and it's planning money, it does create the PDF and will start the official process of something that's really been talked about for nearly 20 years. So I just want to thank the committee for moving that forward, and glad that we're going to be able to take those steps, as well as the other money for safe routes to schools, to dramatically speed up the process in which we not only assess but make improvements. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thought this was just a work session, but if we need to move this through the committee's recommendation.
Yeah.
Yep, it's just a work session. Yep.
It's a work session. If you move the committee's recommendation, that'll be the starting point for reconciliation.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you all very much. We should move it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then let's move it. Who would like to move? We have a committee recommendation, and by acclamation, we all support that committee recommendation. All right. Thank you. It's official.
Thank you all.
All right, that moves us on to item number 13, which is legislative session day number 9, call of bills for final reading. This is Bill 3521, prevailing wage requirements, construction contracts as amended. The Government Operations Committee recommends enactment with amendments. This, of course, is a follow-up to a procedural vote that we had to take last month, and I want to especially thank Ms. McCartney-Green, who has been working diligently through this entire process, and this is trial by fire here, one of the more complicated measures that she's had to undertake since she has joined the council, and I appreciate her diligence. I'm going to turn it over to her to kind of set the stage for where we are right now generally, and then I'm going to make some general opening comments, and I see some of my colleagues would like to make some opening comments as well. So why don't we start with colleagues making opening comments before turning it over to Ms. McCartney-Green. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Hucker, who is co-lead for this piece of legislation, and then turn it over to Councilmember Navarro, who's in the queue next to speak as well. Why don't I turn it over to the chair of the Government Operations Committee? That is the appropriate order. So, Councilmember Navarro, my apologies.
No problem. No, thank you so much, Mr. President. I do want to once again just thank my colleagues on the committee. Obviously, we had a very robust deliberation work sessions here, and Ms. McCarty-Green also was very helpful in terms of deliberating on this particular bill. It's such an important bill for us to consider, of course, given many of the different types of conversations that this council has engaged in order to really align many of our goals in this county with regards to being able to have economic sufficiency, with regards to ensuring that we balance that very important goal with some other policy areas that we have committed to, such as, for example, the provision of housing, the provision of affordable housing. I mean, there are just so many different things to balance here. And so I just wanted to, reflect that we did have quite a robust conversation. We did conclude that we wanted to move forward the bill to the council and then have some of those additional items, such as the inclusion of pilots, for example, and the employee preference pieces for that to be deliberated by the full council, because we did not feel that we had the information necessary to understand the practical impact of those types of amendments to those other goals. And so again, it's one of those areas where it's so hard for legislators, because on the one hand, you can say that if we don't move aggressively, and we had our Council of Governments presentation last week about the economic snapshot of the region, and it was very clear by Mr. Desjardins that unless we move very aggressively in the space of provision of housing, the county was going to be in trouble. And this morning we celebrated the agricultural reserve. Well, guess what? A third of our land mass is dedicated to agriculture, which is something that we hold as such value, which means that we don't have that much land, right? The Washington Business Journal just published an article talking about how folks who have been moving from D.C. out of Washington, D.C. are going to Prince George's County primarily. Why? Because there's more land available and it's more affordable, which also means that then companies want to relocate there, which then brings jobs, which are so important when we have conversations about equity. And so these things are all connected, and we can't necessarily pick out one piece and then think that we have solved many of those important policy goals that really speak to the heart of what we're trying to do, especially in areas of the county that have not seen redevelopment or revitalization or job creation. And we have left many of our residents behind because they have not had that access. And so it seems as if this is a straightforward, simple conversation, but it's not. And so I do want to thank all of my colleagues, because everyone has wrestled with these issues. And I think that we perhaps today can arrive at a good space to move us forward and to, lead once again. I know the state has moved forward with their action, but also lead again and as we again continue to balance all of these competing policy goals to move the county forward. So with that, Mr. President, I appreciate you letting me just set the context for why we are here, and once again remind us all that nothing is black and white. This binary conversations seem to very easy to have or seem catchy, but as I said, when you apply it on the ground, it's not so clear cut. And so I do, again, appreciate where I think we have landed and where we may end up today. Thank you.
Thank you for that context, and that was well said. Councilmember Hucker.
Very well said. Yes, I would second everything the chair said. I really want to thank and highlight Chair Navarro, and all the members of the GO committee for all your work on this bill. Every one of you made this bill better and contributed to it and put a lot of thought into it, and our staff, especially Ms. McCartney Green, put so much time into it. This is a big bill, and it's complicated, and it affects an awful lot of contractors and an awful lot of workers, and the law hasn't been updated in 23 years, and a lot has changed in 23 years. So it's, I think it's worth the time that was put in, but I really want to acknowledge all the work that went into this. I certainly want to thank Councilmember Jawando for co-lead sponsoring this with me, and all of you for co-sponsoring it, and Directors Shetty and Nagam and Frank Demaray and everybody else who's put time into it all. You didn't ask for this. We dropped it in your lap, and it's taken up a bunch of time. So we know you're already busy and appreciate the time you had to put into this as well. They needed something to do, yes. Councilmember Katz said that, not me, okay, for the record. For the record, just so it was on the record. And I definitely want to thank all the businesses, and construction unions, and trade organizations, the Mid-Atlantic contractors, mechanical contractors, 225 companies that recommended passage of this bill. I was really excited to introduce this. It's been on my mind for many years, sort of a bucket list issue. And I've been in touch with Councilmember Irvin, who is glad we're updating this and was the sponsor of the bill 23 years ago. This bill's to me, it's all about fairness, and it's about economic competitiveness. It's going to make sure that our contractors and our local workers have a fair shot at doing the work of building Montgomery County in the future. And that's something we all, I think, can agree on. I've been surprised to do some research and find low-cost out-of-state contractors and poorly paid out-of-state workers building county buildings. And that's avoidable. And if they are getting that work and doing that work, that means there's local contractors and local workers who are sitting at home and missing out on salaries for their families and economic development opportunities for those companies. So this bill, I think, helps in 4 ways: creates more middle-class jobs right here in Montgomery County. Given that we're last in the region in job creation, we all want to focus on that and turning that around. It reduces the demand on our social services because it means more of our local workers will be put to work here and not depend on our social services. It incentivizes excellent apprenticeship training. All of us care about our career pathways and the ability to train our young people for careers, not just temporary jobs. And this bill builds that value in, and it expands our workforce and economic opportunities for all our young people as well, including residents re-entering the workforce. I'm very excited about where we are. I'm grateful to everybody for putting so much hard work into it. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando has requested to speak, but I understand he's having some issues with his audio, so I'm not sure if he's able to join, but he's requested to make some opening comments as co-lead of the bill. Councilmember Jawando.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. Appreciate the comments by colleagues, in particular Councilmember Hucker as co-lead of the bill. Really appreciate working with you on this, and glad we're going to pass it. It's an auspicious day that all things work out the way they should.
Councilmember Jawando, I'm so sorry. You're kind of you're difficult to hear. I don't know if you can try again.
Better, worse, same?
Better.
Okay, great. I was thanking colleagues, particularly Councilmember Hucker as co-lead on the bill. And I said it's an auspicious day because, this is going to pass just the day after the General Assembly passed the statewide version of this bill. The first state to do so in such a comprehensive way. And I think it's always good to have the right policy at every level of government. And this is going to take us leaps and bounds from creating better wages, better quality of life, reduce social services, many of the things that have been mentioned, and also realizing that it took us a couple decades to update this. Depending on how the final bill plays out today, there's some amendments.
Councilmember Jawando, I'm so sorry, but now you're really difficult to understand now.
Can you hear me or no?
That's better. That's much better.
Okay. I was saying that the last thing I was saying was that it's really good that we're passing it the day after the state, and that it also is a work in progress. This might not be a perfect bill at the end of the day, but we always make continual progress. I'll have some amendments to offer that I think can improve it based on our previous conversations. But overall, it's a really good step forward that we're going to be able to pass a prevailing wage bill and be in line, really ahead of the curve in other parts of the country and the region. So with that, I'll pause for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. McCartney Green, I'm going to turn it over to you just to kind of provide us with the big picture here, and then I have some notes as well that I will talk about in just a moment or two, but if you could remind us why we're here and where we are.
Certainly. Thank you, Council President. I just want to note for the record with me today representatives from the executive branch, Mr. Ash Shetty from the Office of Procurement, Mrs. Nancy Feldman from Finance, and to my right I have Mr. Asim and Mr. Frank Damaris. Did I say that right? Close enough, sorry. With that being said, as you mentioned, this bill has had different opportunities through GO Committee in terms of hearing amendments and the bill specifically. And so when the So the council initially discussed this bill on February 15th, and when it did, it took into consideration the recommendation from the GO Committee, but there were two outstanding amendments. And so one of those included Amendment Number 3. Amendment Number 3 will be referred to as Amendment Number 3, or the pilot amendment, or the adopted amendment. And I'm using that because there's varying of terms, whether it's in our notes or in our conversation, and I want to make sure that everyone that's watching is understanding what amendments we're talking about. So Amendment Number 3 was adopted on February 15th. And with that being said, the council members had various questions and concerns about the input of that amendment. With that, the council decided to believe that there needed additional amendment and was tabled. And for correction of the actual packet, the bill was tabled by Councilmember Reamer and not Councilmember Friedson. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record. Once the bill was tabled, there was a follow-up council session held on March 1st. With that being said, there was a motion for reconsideration of Amendment Number 3. And that motion for reconsideration was postponed until today, March 22nd. And so here we are today looking at whether or not we want a motion for reconsideration on Amendment Number 3. And so that's the posture of where this bill is right now, and I'm happy to stop right there and to any questions.
Councilmember Reamer.
The packet, thank you, Ms. Ledeen. The packet seemed to say here that the motion, what is before us? Is an amended bill before us or not? This motion to consideration has been quite confusing for everyone.
Correct. And so just to clarify the record, there was a motion for reconsideration that was put on the floor on March 1st. Yeah. During that council session, there was a vote to postpone the vote on that motion to reconsider. And
vote
so
to postpone the vote, okay?
Yes. And so one of the things is the wonky part of the law.
Reconsider it now.
We talked about the council rules a little bit, Rule 10 specifically, that allows you to make a motion to reconsider, but it also gives you the opportunity to postpone that vote. And so during the prior council session, there was not a vote specifically on that motion to reconsider.
And the reason we didn't vote and do everything that one day was because we needed more time to get more information, which we now have before us, that puts us in a better decision to be more informed as we deliberate this particular amendment on pilots. And procedurally, because of Robert's rules, we would have had to have voted on it immediately at the following session. So we decided not to do that, and that's why the first action that we need to take, and this is just a vote because it's already been moved and seconded, and I want to make sure I have the language right, but we need to vote for reconsideration. So all those in favor of voting for reconsideration, please raise your hands.
Can you say what that means?
Ms. McCartney Green, could you describe exactly what that means? I want to make sure we get this
Sure.
technically correct.
Fair enough. And so the motion for reconsideration is reconsidering Amendment Number 3 that amended the county construction finance definition to include payment in lieu of taxes. It also defined payment in lieu of taxes in pilots. And so right now the council is essentially going back before that vote ever happened. And so that's what that motion of reconsideration will do.
Right. Yep. So with that clarified, all those in favor of voting?
I just want to make sure, so, sorry, an adoption of that amendment would void it and strike or kill that, right? And so just want to make sure in the affirmative, that's what that will do.
Correct. I need a third cup of coffee. So could we please then, all those in favor of voting for reconsideration, please raise your hand.
No.
Okay, that is unanimous among all those present, and no for Councilmember Jawanda, who is chiming in virtually. So we now have several amendments that are going to be for us right now. And let me just give a little bit of background on these amendments for those of you that are following. And there are many people following this. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee wisely recommended that there be additional information provided on what the potential outcomes would be if we enacted Amendment Number 3 to include pilot projects. And what we since discovered is that one of the potential unintended consequences is that many of the public-private partnerships that the county moves forward with organizations such as Montgomery Housing Partnerships, Victory Housing, and others would potentially be at risk because of the complicated nature of the financing system. And obviously, these are not market rate. And so the return on investment for these projects are not there. And so to meet the developer's part of the way, the county interjects itself in these projects in order to be able to move them forward. And as was acknowledged by Chair Navarro, we have a housing crisis in Montgomery County, a very significant one. And as we heard from the Council of Governments, we are falling even further behind because of the need that is growing exponentially across our region, but particularly in Montgomery County. And so an effort was made, and an amendment will be put forward in a moment by Councilmember Jawando that would exempt housing projects from the extension of pilot projects. And there have been many meetings with our housing partners and leaders, and they have acknowledged that the amendment that Councilmember Jawando that is about to put forward would hold harmless the vast majority of housing projects that we know are critical to helping to chip away at some of the housing needs we have in our community, particularly workforce housing, senior housing, and low-income housing. So I now, with that as context, turn it over to Councilmember Jawando to make this particular motion for his amendment, and then I will, after he makes that motion, turn it over to Council Vice President Glass, who has his own amendment regarding a separate issue that was impacted by these bills and projects on WMATA sites, which he will explain and provide some context for in a moment. But Councilmember Jawando, the floor is yours to describe your motion and move it forward.
Great. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, just let me know if you can at any point. Appreciate the context.
Right.
And as is discussed, the previous action vacated the amendment that we passed to include pilots. And again, just so for the millions watching at home, and there probably are in this context and many other interested parties, that amendment would have just required that if public money, taxpayer dollars, is abated, if you're not required to pay property tax, for example, on a project because it's a public good or for whatever the reason, because housing is good, we need more of it, absolutely, that when public dollars are involved, similar with the overall reach of this bill and the whole goal of this bill, and similar to action taken in the state of Oregon and in the city of New York and other projects, that when public money is involved, including pilots, that prevailing wages should be paid, that people should have life-sustaining prevailing wages. And again, I think it's important to remind people that's what this bill is, a prevailing wage bill. And when things are built for the public good or for any good, housing, county buildings, government buildings, people should be paid a prevailing wage, which all that says is a wage that is paid in the area that allows you to make what people should make in order to sustain themselves here in the county. It's different from a minimum wage, which you can't live on here, and we all acknowledge that. And so it says when there's public dollars, if there's a private transaction that doesn't need public money, you do whatever you want. But this helps raise all boats, and that's the goal of prevailing wage. So my amendment would extended that to when there were tax abatements. And so but we've heard from folks, and we've been trying to compromise for weeks here, and have compromised and spoke to many, many people, including our nonprofit providers of affordable housing, very important partners. And so this amendment that I'm proposing now which is referred to as Amendment 4, which would define payment in lieu of taxes or pilots, which I just described, which is described here, and it would exempt. It would change the definition, which would exempt folks that are developing affordable housing. And I could read it or have Mr. Levine read it, Ms. McCartney Green read it, if that's preferable, whichever is preferred. But it's number 4 in the packet, and it would strike and amend lines 58 and 62 as follows. Payment in lieu of taxes or pilot means an authorized payment made by the owner of a qualifying development or qualified housing development instead of paying the county real property tax, including real property tax levied under a special area taxing law that would otherwise be due. And then it would amend lines 34 to 37 to define county finance construction contract means a contract for construction work that is awarded by the county or where county funds are used to finance all or part of the cost of the contract. A county finance construction contract includes a construction contract that receives in whole or in part a payment in lieu of taxes under sections 5224B or 5224A, unless, this is the relevant part, the qualified housing development does not exceed 4 stories. So if it's lower than 4 stories, or most affordable housing, above ground level, or is provided under section 5224C, which is our affordable housing developers. So, and that means they're developing at least 50% of housing that's affordable. Ms. McCartney Green, did I state that correctly?
Yes, I'd like to give some additional context, but I'd like, once you're finished, Councilmember Jawanda, I can chime in.
Sure, happy to do it. And then the last thing I'll say with this is, just to give context, this is going to remove, quite a few projects. I think there were, over the last several years, there were only 10 projects out of 500 or so that didn't provide 50% affordability or wouldn't qualify in this. So this removed quite a bit, but it's a compromise under the circumstances. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. McCartney Green, to clarify anything.
Thank you, Councilmember. And so when looking at page 14, so everyone's following along in the packet, that lists states the amendment number 4. What's very important to recognize is a couple of terms here. And so qualified development is referring to commercial or WMATA properties, and WMATA are properties that are leased that are near transit metro station areas. In addition, in the pilot amendment, there's also qualified housing development. You have to be authorized by the state to be able to qualify for that tax offset or that tax abatement that you can get with a pilot. Moving on to the county finance construction contract, I want to be very careful here, looking at specifically number 2. Is provided under section 5224C. Councilmember Jawanda has already read it, but section 5224C is a recently passed legislation that the council passed under Bill 2621. That language is not currently in the code and will become effective March 28th in a few days. And so for those that are following along and are looking at, previously the council had a hearing and a session on pilots for affordable housing and passed that legislation late December. It will become effective March 28, 2022. So just want to make sure that clear that section 5224C is in the enacted bill for 2621 if anyone's looking at that language. What does that specifically say, or what does that specifically exclude? Owner-operated HOCs, that's considered an automatic pilot, are owner-controlled by a nonprofit developer that has at least 50% or more dwelling units. And then third exemption is for owner-controlled by a nonprofit housing developer that are subject to the Section 8 project-based rental assistance. So those are the three sections that are being exempted under Section 5224C, just for clarity. And so I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. And Mr. President, I just wanted to make one final comment and seek a second. It's important. I appreciate Ms. McCartney-Green pointing this out. This is all of our affordable housing providers. I have another amendment I'll offer later that will relate to the transition and to some of the WMATA projects that we've talked about. But at this time, this is the amendment that I'm offering.
Great. So that has been moved by Councilmember Jawando. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Hucker. We now move to discussion. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just point of clarification. Just wanted to ask a couple questions of the council attorney. So this is going to go back to essentially the pilot bill for nonprofit affordable housing providers that Councilmember Reamer and I introduced together, which is not currently written into the code. So if you search for 5224C, it won't make a whole lot of sense, as you just noted, but it will in a week from now.
Correct.
Essentially. And just to clarify, there are a lot of affordable housing projects that are not nonprofit provider projects that this would not exclude. They would be subject to prevailing wage for a for-profit provider. Nonprofit providers are the only ones that would be exempted. Is that accurate?
Nonprofit with at least 50% or more affordable units, yes.
Right, so a nonprofit provider with 50% that's eligible under the recently passed pilot bill would not be subject to the provisions of this bill, but for-profit or providers that do not reach 50% of restricted units would be subject to it.
That's correct, Councilman.
Did DHCA want to comment on that?
Good afternoon, Asim Nigam, Director DHCA. It's good to see you, in person. It's good to be back in new improved council chamber. So just to answer your question, Councilor Friedson, if it's a for-profit developer and as long as the project does not exceed 4 stories above ground, then this bill will not apply to them, prevailing wage bill.
Right. Separate provision,
yes.
but yes.
So either that or 52-24C.
And do we have the numbers for the last 10 years of how many affordable housing projects, nonprofit versus for-profit, and under 4 stories versus above 4 stories? Essentially, what would be captured? Councilmember Jawando noted this in his comments, but have we looked into that number? I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
I would say majority of our projects are done with nonprofits, but every year we do a couple of projects with for-profit entities, and majority of those projects are under 4 stories. Now, that being said, we are looking at one project as we speak, which is either 4.5 or 5 stories, how you look at those number of stories. So there are a couple of projects every year where this prevailing wage bill is going to apply. But majority of our projects are done with nonprofits and they are under 4 stories. So this bill will exempt most of those projects.
So most, but there are a few that it would still apply to.
Yes, I would say a couple every year where this bill is going to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion regarding this amendment? Yes, Councilmember Reamer.
Well, thank you. I just, how will you handle that? You have projects seeking county support. We only have so many dollars in any given year. And they're seeking county support through payment in lieu of taxes. What do you expect you'll do in response to those projects that are not exempted now, that would be subject to the prevailing wage?
So for those couple of projects which will fall within the purview of this bill, we'll continue to work with our developers, with our partners like we normally do. We underwrite those projects. We try to maximize all funding sources. As you know, in our low-income housing tax credit projects, there are multiple layers of financing. We try to maximize every layer of financing, so we'll continue to work with them. And as we mentioned during the last council meeting, prevailing wage is one of the factors which will increase the cost. There are other factors too which may increase the cost. You know, it would go up for any other factor as such. So we'll continue to work with our partners.
So we're going to have to use money from our Housing Initiative Fund to pay the expenses of tracking all of this payroll, which is enormously complicated. And the projects will now have to seek more money from the county, leaving us less money for other projects. So we will build less affordable housing if we are able to provide additional funding for those projects that are facing an increased cost. It could also be that some of those projects just never come forward because they have many costs that they have to grapple with, and it's always hard to get projects financed. We don't know what the implication really will be. We could get fewer affordable housing projects. We will have, our dollars will not go as far. And I actually didn't realize it was as many as a couple every year. I thought that this exemption clause was going to capture the overwhelming share of projects, but it sounds like it's not quite that encompassing. And so this will be a real issue for at least a couple projects a year going forward, a couple affordable housing projects going forward.
So just to give you an example, like this year, if you're closing 12 projects, I would say one project will fall within the purview of this bill per se, even after doing this amendment number 4. Now, as we mentioned earlier, most of these projects have multiple layers of financing. So if there's an increased cost, not to go too technical on this issue, there could be increased equity coming into the project because the cost has gone up, the basis has gone up. So we try to underwrite all of those projects. So yes, we'll consider all of the funding sources, including HEF, and we'll try to leverage our county dollars to the maximum extent.
Okay. Now, the other point I want to make here is that the construction jobs on those projects are good jobs. They're good jobs. We're not talking about taking bad jobs and making them good jobs. Construction jobs are good jobs. And the employees on these projects are making good wages. That's the nature of the industry. If they're, whatever trades they are, they're working on reputable projects. They're doing valuable work. They're skilled labor. And so we should not be under the impression that this somehow is raising a standard from the bottom of the barrel. These are good construction jobs that are available to our residents, to anyone working in the industry. And so under this amendment, there will be less money to go around for affordable housing. It will be harder to build affordable housing. And we would exempt many projects, but not all of them. And that's the impact of this amendment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando, followed by Councilmember Katz.
Yeah, appreciate it. Mr. President, just making sure you can hear me again.
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. I have to address directly some of the presumptions, the characterizations that were just made about my amendment, which are completely false by Councilmember Reamer. This would, under that logic, this bill wouldn't even be required. If prevailing wage doesn't raise wages to an acceptable and appropriate standard, we wouldn't need to pass the bill on any construction project that's done. If the wages are fine, then they should be fine for county projects now. So that's just can't be true. You can't have it both ways. And if folks are paying prevailing wage, one of the things that Director Nagam and others discussed at our multiple sessions here last session, then they're going to be fine. And many are, and some are. If they're paying prevailing wage, which again is the wage that you should be paid in this area for working on these types of projects. That's all that prevailing wage means. That's a life-sustaining wage. And this would just require that and exempt, if you go on this year, I think you said, Director Nagam said 12 projects, one might, private sector project might have fallen into this. That's, less than 10%, single digits. And again, it also assumes that creates this false choice, which I think this bill seeks to also get us out of, that you can't pay a prevailing wage and have a good thing like affordable housing or housing near transit or build a library or. You can and should do both. And there are multiple levels of financing. A lot of things on projects cost money. The return on investment from Wall Street, how much money people are trying to make, that costs money. The construction costs of the materials, that's the most expensive thing right now. And other things. So, and there's been reputable peer-reviewed studies that show that prevailing wage, one of many costs, is in the single digits. Some have said between 2 and 3%. Now, others might try to inflate that and say other things, but again, if you're paying good wages and we need prevailing wage on county-funded projects, we should need it when taxpayer dollars are in play. We're compromising here and saying because affordable housing is very important, HOC and these projects under 4 stories and 90+% of all projects, as we understand, that come through, they'll be exempt because that's a public good and we're trying to balance and compromise. So that characterization is a mischaracterization completely. And I just have to say that. I think the last thing I'll say related to this is there's still a large incentive here, that can be levied. The director has the ability, as he said, in these cases, to provide money, to provide a pilot. And actually, I'll pose that as a question, Director Nagam. If there is one of these cases, one of these less than 10% cases, if you evaluate it, wouldn't you still have the authority to provide additional resources or work with them on their financing and their overall project?
Councilor Javanda, as we mentioned earlier, we continue to work with our developer partners. We continue to underwrite these transactions. We look at all of the financing sources, including HEF, to see, and yes, we can provide a pilot. But that being said, our goal here is to maximize our county resources to the extent in terms of leveraging county dollars. So everything is on the table. There are multiple layers of financing in these projects. So we look at every layer of financing to see how we maximize. So that's what we'll be doing.
Got it. I appreciate that. And we should be able to pay a prevailing wage, as is the goal of this bill, when public dollars are at play. And that's the point of this amendment, with a significant exception for affordable housing, understanding the importance there as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz, followed by Councilmember Huckert.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I guess we've been able to make this bill as confusing as we possibly can be. We started out, and I certainly am in favor of a prevailing wage, was, I guess, 3 weeks ago, still am. And I believe the second part, the transition clause, is probably more important. The amendment number 5, I guess, is probably more important than this one that we're talking about now. The other thing that we keep forgetting to mention is that the cost of the land is a very important part of the cost of the housing. And when we talk about affordable housing, and there is the possibility that if an entity wanted to sell their land and couldn't sell it for the price that they thought it would be sold for, decided to lower the cost of that land, and that the housing could be built using a pilot, which helps fill the gap, etc. that is also part of these, should be, in my opinion, part of these discussions. And it's not at this point. We're saying that someone makes a deal and that they can't make the deal fit because the cost of the land and all these other expenses, and they come to the county for a pilot, and of course the county helps with the to fill the gap. But if it doesn't work, then at some point somebody needs as a business to sit down and figure out how, if somebody really wants to sell their land, what the right price is. So I'm fine with Amendment 4. I think that Amendment 4 actually gets us to where we want to be. I think the transition clause, Amendment 5, really becomes a part of the fairness part of this. I know we're not discussing that now, but that becomes a part of the fairness of this, so that somebody who did play by the rules gets to continue to go forward. So as far as Amendment number 4 that Councilmember Juwando is putting forward, I'm fine with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just quickly, I don't want to pile on, but just because Councilmember Reamer had mentioned that all construction jobs are good-paying jobs, they're not. There's a great variety. In the construction trade, certainly the average is higher than service sector generally, but there's a great variety depending on the training and the licensure and the skill set of the individual and the trade. But there's a growing amount of work being done by low-wage workers in the basic trades, laborers, cement masons, and even flaggers on a road project. We see them all the time. Many of them they might be immigrants recruited from abroad by exploitive companies, labor brokers that bring them here and charge very high fees to find them a job, to place them in a job where they're making minimum wage or very little more than that. So they end up bringing home less than minimum wage. So that's very common in our region, much more so than other regions in the Northeast, partly because of the market and partly because of the weak prevailing wage laws that we have here. So that's the point of the bill, and I just wanted to address that because it's those workers who will benefit if we have a bill that covers as many workers as possible. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's everybody who has signed up to speak. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded to move forward Amendment number 4. All those in favor of that amendment, please raise your hands.
Yes.
Okay, that is Council Members Katz, Hucker, Vice President Glass, Councilmember Rice, and Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Juwando, and myself voting in favor. Opposed? Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Reamer. Okay, we are now going to move on to the next amendment, which is being put forward by Council Vice President Glass, which has been circulated among colleagues. There is a difference in the transition clauses that have been articulated in the bill that's in the packet proposed by Councilmember Juwando and the bill that's being proposed by Council Vice President Glass. I'll turn it over to him to tee it up, and then Ms. McCartney-Green, we're going to need your help to make sure we don't miss anything.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have 2 amendments. One is a transition that you alluded to, and we can talk about that later. But the first one I want to bring up is a continuation of the conversation we just had. We just had a conversation about the importance of affordable housing. And this council is having a much broader conversation about affordable housing. The region, and quite frankly, the nation, is having the same conversation. And I appreciate how this conversation started moments ago with the GEO Committee Chair, Ms. Navarro, talking about how we continue making progress, and sometimes there are things we need to look out for as we continue that march forward. And in the last few weeks, I've had a lot of conversations. I know there have been a lot of community conversations with all of us about the potential impacts of this legislation, particularly what it does towards housing that we want at our metro stations. You know, I am very supportive of housing at metro stations, literally on WMATA property, because we know it is sustainable. We know it is transit-oriented development. It is the epitome of smart growth, and it's how we need to continue growing in this climate crisis that we're in. It's that reason why this council supported the Housing at Metro Rail Stations Act, of which I was a co-sponsor, and I appreciate the original sponsors, council members Reamer and Friedson, for introducing that last year or so. And that legislation incentivized housing at our metro stations. And it made sure that at least 50% of that housing is rental. It made sure that 25% was moderately priced dwelling units, AKA affordable housing, devoted to residents, at least half of the residents, or at least residents had to make less than half of the area median income, which is $50,000. It also required local hiring clause to make sure that at least 25% of the workers working on those projects were residents of the county while they were performing that work. It was a good piece of legislation, and I'm proud that we moved that forward. And so the legislation that's before us now has seemed to put some of that in jeopardy. We're not quite sure what the impacts will be, but we know that there are a number of projects underway that have said that this would change their dynamics. And quite frankly, when you look at the dynamics around the entire DC region, we know that we need to do this type of work. And I have concerns about putting that work in jeopardy. Last thing I'll say is that the Council of Governments, I started by commenting on the comments of Chair Navarro, but the Council of Governments, in putting forward its 2030 regional housing targets, said that the DC region needs to create 320,000 housing units, and 75% of those should be in activity centers near high capacity transit. And so while we put an emphasis on affordable housing, as was just discussed in the previous amendment, we have to put an emphasis on housing near metro and housing near transit. And so the amendment that is now before us would carve out projects that have received pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, in coordination with WMATA property, so that we can continue doing what we need, which is building on metro, so that we have smart growth, we have sustainable growth, we have development that does not rely on vehicular infrastructure. This is the type of development we need. This is why I've put this amendment forward, and hope my colleagues will support it.
Okay, it has been, the motion has been moved by Council Vice President Glass and seconded by Council Member Friedson. Ms. McCartney Green, just want to turn it over to you and make sure just if you could describe anything we may have missed, anything that you think we should add in our discussion here as we begin this part of the conversation.
Will do. In very brief, Council Vice President Glass very much talked about the impetus of the bill or of the amendment. But for further context, and I think you also referred to Bill 2920, that was the WMATA bill. So we'll call it WMATA Metro Housing Railing. Is that correct, Council Vice President? Did I say that right?
The law actually stipulates that it needs to be called.
It's the Housing at Metro Rail Stations Act.
Thank you. I want to make sure I got that right. And so during that discussion, there was a joint committee session between GO and Fed where the amendment for prevailing wage was raised during that conversation. And the committee decided then to reject prevailing wages for the WMATA properties or properties located, commercial high rises that's near transit stations. And so just to make sure that that was clear. And then the amendment that's being offered is very similar to amendment number 4. However, it removes specifically qualified development under section 5224A, and it leaves in the provision of the affordable housing provision that's under section 5224B. And so for clarity, it is looking at amendment number 4 for the definition of payment in lieu of taxes is removing the word qualifying development, which refers to a WMATA property. That's the reason why we're removing it there. The second part of that amendment is the definition of county finance construction contract that removes the WMATA properties under section 5224A, and it leaves the exemptions that were referenced in our prior conversation with the affordable housing and those 3 different specific exemptions. I'm sorry, did I say that clearly? I felt like, okay. That's it, Council President.
Okay. Councilmember Reamer, followed by Councilmember Giwando.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Glass, for your motion. I really appreciate it. I know a lot of people do, and if the council supports this, I think it will have tremendous positive implications for future public goals. The original amendment, or the original law, now Section 5224A, which was to establish this abatement for development on metro property, had many public benefits. That was what was so crucial about it. It was urgent climate action because it was facilitating the potential development of thousands of housing units, as many as 9,000 housing units on metro property in this county, including nearly 2,000 affordable housing units, units that have never been built as high-rise in this county despite decades of property availability. And that property's been there. A metro has been inviting development on those properties for decades. We have never seen a high-rise go up in modern economic times because, well, for a lot of reasons, due to the cost of construction, the cost of infrastructure at the stations, and many other factors. And so Metro doesn't pay any property tax to the county. And we are not collecting any property tax today from these properties. Without any development, we're not getting any property tax anyway. So the whole theory of the legislation that we passed previously was, let's get a chance to get some housing in a very climate smart way and eventually collect some significant tax revenue that we can use for our schools, for our public transportation, for our housing, affordable housing, all these other goals. And we would do that by making it economical to do the development on top of Metro. Unfortunately, to speak metaphorically, it is as though we said, we will give a $100,000 incentive to a project, and then this amendment would say, and now a project, you've got $110,000 in costs. And so it leaves the project back at square one or even worse. And the only studies that I've seen shared with colleagues support the view that the cost increase is substantial and it exceeds the value of the incentive. And so this takes us back worse than to go. And with it goes housing, climate, jobs, tax revenue, metro ridership, thousands of daily metro riders, all of that. And that is why it is so important to maintain the provision that this council adopted, which Mr. Glass's amendment would do, and allow us to get some progress on our metro stations. We need this to happen. We desperately need this to happen. And it's not just us. If you look around the region, you won't see projects on metro stations anywhere. We're not making this up. It's real. These metro station properties can't develop without public investment. And I cited that earlier with the White Flint. This county executive's own hired team came back with a report that said there's tens of millions of dollars of expenses needed at the White Flint metro station before it is even close to being viable for development. And we've had projects in the works that are spending $500,000 a month on their development costs, saying we might have to stop if this passes. And that's untenable. We've seen that before. We've seen companies have to close up shop and pull out of projects as a result of council regulations or laws, and I hope that we won't do it in this case. So I urge support for the amendment, and I hope that we can allow for development to take place on those metro stations. Thank you.
I have comments on this too, but I'm going to save them for the end. Councilmember Giwando is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. We all want to see more housing at transit, particularly our metro stops. That's something that we all share. The question is how do we get it, and what should the subsidies be, right? And no one, I think we also all agree that taxpayer subsidies are fine because it is more expensive. And one of the things that is being missed here, I think, in this conversation, is that under the amendment we just passed, WMATA sites would be covered. There's a transition amendment that I was going to offer next that would have exempted any projects in the pipeline, and there's two that we know about at Rosner and White Flint, that they would have been able to be exempt from this, and so that going forward, anyone seeking a project would be able to factor in, again, the 2 to 5% cost increase that we do have data showing us. I don't know that, I think, again, that's another incorrect statement. There's been multiple reports, peer-reviewed studies sent, balance that against, data we've seen from interested parties for one project or so. But that aside, that anyone coming for a future project, because if you're in the pipeline, to Councilmember Katz's point, you acted under the assumption that this was available, and so you should be able to continue. But going forward, you can factor that into your overall cost of project. Again, in order to do what the bill goal is, to pay people a wage that is life-sustaining and prevailing, and not use low road contractors or the folks that Councilmember Hucker described that are going out and charging a fee to bring the lowest people on board to do certain lower jobs. That will have no protection against. But this would, in these projects where we want to build, which we certainly want to build as a priority on transit, and I'm very supportive of that, which is not only the most expensive to build, it's the most expensive to live in. And many of the things that were discussed by the sponsor of this amendment, Councilmember Glass, I put forward the more 3 bedrooms, trying to get more affordability, trying to improve this bill through the committee sessions and at full council, and the WMATA bill, rather, the housing at Metro Stops bill. And there were multiple votes. One at full council that failed 5-4, and the sponsor of this amendment voted for prevailing wage in that context, but it failed 5-4. And the amendment we just passed would reinstate that policy objective, that if you build the most expensive housing to build and the most expensive housing to live in on metro sites, something that we want, you should pay people the prevailing wage. That's all this amendment, that's all that we're saying. And you should factor that into the cost of doing business. You shouldn't have a false choice of it's either we don't pay this or we get no housing, which is how it's being presented by some. I know this to be true because when I offered the 3-bedroom amendment on the housing at metro stations, we heard in committee, oh, this is going to make it too expensive. We can't do it. It's impossible. A couple of days later, we came back and suddenly it was possible. And everyone was for it. So there obviously are ways to factor it in. And all I'm saying is, shouldn't we factor in paying a prevailing wage and avoiding low road contractors on the most expensive housing to live in? We should do that. And there's a way to do it. Final point. This would not change the fundamental point of that bill, of the Housing and Metro bill, which was that you get a 15-year, 100% property tax abatement if you build. 15 years, you don't pay a dime of property tax. That would still be in place and is a significant investment. The fiscal note, you can argue what the right number was. It's tens of millions to hundreds of millions, depending on how many sites are developed. A significant tax benefit for those to build. And we have to ask ourselves, if we can't pay people a prevailing wage to build these projects in the most expensive housing, I think we can. We've seen it done in other places. We should be asking ourselves, is that the right thing? I don't think it is. So I'll have to vote against this. I'm concerned about it. I still think the overall bill is a good bill, but this would gut this previous amendment. And I guess my last question to Ms. Ludine, or to the Director of DHCA, what else would be caught by the previous amendment? Would there be any pilots if this amendment were to pass that would qualify and be required to pay a prevailing wage if this amendment were to pass? What would that universe be? Director McGowan.
Actually, I have not seen the amendment yet, but as we are discussing this, I mean, the points that you have mentioned, I mean, looks like under amendment number 4, if it does not exceed 4 stories, then WMATA property would qualify anyway, and then they will qualify for 15-year exemption. But then if it's more than 4 stories, then, you know, the question is if the owner has to pay a prevailing wage and you need to earn a prevailing wage in order to live in the county, then as Councilman Katz was saying earlier, then you have to factor in how much you want to pay for the piece of property. And all this is a part of the big equation, how much you're paying for the land, how much you're going to pay for the construction. All the pieces need to come together to make it work. So there's no, I'm sorry, but there's no easy answer to that question. The question on the table would be that, you know, if this becomes the law, and if I'm the buyer of a property or if I'm the seller of a property, I'll have to factor in what the new law is about.
Right.
Just to follow up, Councilmember Jawando, and so the amendment number 4, and we're all clear that pilots apply to WMATA and affordable housing, right? And so originally amendment number 4 would exclude HOCs. We talked about 50% or more affordable units in the Section 8 rental housing. What's left is a very limited universe. It's going to be units that have less than 50% of affordable units. It's going to be your for-profits. And so, from my understanding, that's a smaller universe than before. And so what Council Vice President Glass amendment does also removes WMATA, which is a bigger part of pilots that are part of that. So that's if it's clear, it's a limited universe that this would apply to.
Right, so that would take the rest, basically.
Correct.
So you'd have almost nothing that would be required in as far as pilots, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we do pilots for, those two things. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Rwanda.
Thank you. And so for those reasons, I obviously can't support this. You know, again, I think we brought this point up before. If WMATA, if we were building on its own land, they would have to pay prevailing wage. Councilmember Katz brought this up back at the time. I remember him saying it multiple times. If they have to do it, why should we not require it to be done? Because it's a third-party agreement. That doesn't make sense, and it's not fair.
Right.
So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. Just colleagues, quick time check. It's 4 o'clock. We still have a closed-door session and some guests that have been invited to participate in that session. And so we're going to try to get through these last few discussions here and amendments as efficiently as we can, but this is obviously an important issue. Next is Council Vice President Glass, followed by Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Councilmember Jawando stating that he wants housing at metro stations, because I do too. And in recent memory, we have not built housing on metro stations. So we are having this conversation again after we passed unanimously and even overrode a county executive veto regarding the Housing at Metro Rail Stations Act, Bill 2920. And we can't wish housing at Metro into existence, which is why I supported, and this council overwhelmingly supported, that legislation. And I'll remind everybody that that legislation requires at least 50% of the new housing to be rental, and requires 25% of that housing to be moderately priced dwelling units, aka affordable housing that goes to individuals earning less than 50% of the area median income. It's the environmentally sustainable thing to do. It creates more affordable housing where we want it, and we still need to see it happen. So that's why this amendment is so important, because as of now, no new housing has been built at the Metro. I yield back.
Councilmember Friedson, followed by Councilmember Hucker.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief. I think in the interest of time, we litigated this. We relitigated this. This was a major topic of discussion. We spent a considerable amount of time as a council. We voted on it. The county executive vetoed the bill based on that discussion and that vote. And then this council voted 7-2 to override that veto. So, I don't want to relitigate this issue. I could go into all of the reasons why and the discussions that we had. There is a difference between discretionary and non-discretionary pilots. This amendment and the previous amendment would take away the non-discretionary pilots, which this council has passed 2 bills to establish in law. And in the interest of not relitigating, in the interest of being consistent with the prior actions that this council has taken, I'm supportive of this. I appreciate Council Vice President for moving it forward, and I hope we can move forward to a vote on it.
Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no question. It's absolutely critical that all our transit-oriented development projects move forward, and in particular those on WMATA properties. We declared a housing crisis, we declared a climate emergency, and yet we have surface parking lots above some of our priority public properties, metro stations. That makes no sense at all. They could each, and I feel very strongly about that, they could each be the sites of climate-friendly, sustainable housing for hundreds of residents, but they're not. And they should have been a long time ago. TOD and smart growth have been our approach statewide and in this county for a generation. But they haven't been developed year after year. And why haven't they? I've heard multiple explanations from plenty of people close to WMATA and at WMATA, but obviously it's not because of this bill, which isn't yet law. I understand there's a whole lot of sensitivity around this requirement, and the federal government requires prevailing wages, the state government requires prevailing wages and just updated their law last night, and WSSC does. There are thousands of projects that move forward all across the country every year that pay prevailing wages, and that requirement doesn't hold back any of those projects. And according to our nonpartisan research analysts in Annapolis, the cost difference is about 3 to 5%, some of which comes right back to the local economy if you're hiring local contractors and local workers to do the work. So we're talking about hypothetical projects. It's a judgment call any of us are making. We don't have numbers in front of us to prove or disprove. And I fully appreciate the anxiety on the part of many of my colleagues that we don't want to do anything to hold back those projects. And I think reasonable people can disagree, especially when we're talking about hypothetical projects. So personally, I haven't seen enough evidence to show that this would deter investments, but I completely understand why others would feel like they want to add this exemption out of an abundance of caution. So, Mr. Vice President, I'll respectfully decline to vote for the amendment, but I'm very eager that we get the bill itself across the finish line. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to say a couple comments here. This has been really difficult for all of us, I know, and I've lost sleep over this. I really have. The last 2 sessions that we've had on this issue have been really difficult for so many different reasons. I supported the amendment that Councilmember Jawando put forward in our last discussion because I do think, all things being equal, it is absolutely appropriate, which is why I'm supporting this overall bill, for us to pay a prevailing wage for county-funded projects, which is the right thing to do and is consistent with state and federal government. But I voted to table it because I needed more information to have my eyes wide open on the impact of this bill on other projects. And that's why I supported the last amendment, which will potentially miss a couple of projects here or there, but by and large holds harmless the vast majority of projects that the council will move forward. With regards to WMATA projects, I've learned a lot since our last discussion, and the complexities around building on top of WMATA sites and how expensive those projects are because of the parking requirements, because of the architectural requirements to build on top of essentially tunnels, is profound and significant. And I've also been frustrated, as all of us have, at the lack of development and the lack of spark in communities that desperately want it, that desperately need it, that want to see the types of job opportunities that exist in Bethesda and in Silver Spring and in other parts of our community, but that don't have it in their own communities. And we've heard that extensively through Thrive. And so balancing that with the acknowledgement that we want to do right by the employees that construct these critically important facilities has been really difficult. But in a recent conversation I had with WMATA leadership, I learned a couple of things which haven't been discussed thus far. And while I won't go into the details because that will be up to them to do, they are releasing their own strategic plan in the next couple of months that specifically highlight 2 communities in Montgomery County that have been desperately trying to seek more development, more workforce options, and more housing, and have not been able to. Both of these communities have been deemed really urgent for WMATA as potential investments. And they specifically cite in the strategic plan the bill that was passed by this council and the support for WMATA projects in the previous, in the fall, as a reason that they're going to aggressively pursue these projects moving forward. So we're seeing traction that we never saw before, or we haven't seen in a long time. And there is concern that if we enact the prevailing wage component, that will stifle the conversations that are occurring right now. But I think that it's also important to note, and the next amendment we were going to discuss was going to exempt, as Councilmember Jawanda noted, the projects that were already in the queue. But what this would do if we move this prevailing wage component is significantly hinder the possibility for 2 additional projects which aren't currently in the queue, but are working through some deliberation and discussion right now. So I've struggled with this mightily, but I do think in the end we need to signal that we need the housing, we need these workforce development projects, we need the economic development that comes from these projects to then help address some of the myriad of needs that we have across our entire county that we're not going to be able to keep pace with. We have been able to in this budget so far, thanks to the investments of the federal government, but that has an expiration date. And we have to be aggressive moving forward to make sure future generations have the infrastructure that they need for this county to meet its full potential and keep pace with local jurisdictions. So this has been a tough conversation all the way around, but I appreciate this amendment, and I appreciate the attempt, which I was part of, to see if we can find a sweet spot. But it's clear that with or without me, this has support of the majority of the council, and I can understand why, given the concerns that have been raised in this conversation and by a number of the stakeholders who are very closely following this. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Oh, sorry about that. Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, we're about to vote, but I do want to share that for me, when we did adopt the WMATA bill regarding the pilots and applying to that, recognizing the difficulty of building on WMATA sites, I kept thinking back to when I began to represent Wheaton, and that was it just coincided with the time that we had to make a decision about Wheaton redevelopment. The proposal was to spend $40 million on a platform over the bus bays on WMATA property to one day build a spec Class A building. Well, immediately in the halls of what then was the 6th floor, all my colleagues started making plans for those $40 million. And as a matter of fact, the second entrance to the Bethesda Metro Station was the contender for what that money was going to be used for, because they all said, why would we spend that much money? And it was all because this is what it probably would take to do something on a WMATA site. And, I was sort of new, but not too new. And I said, absolutely not. I am not going to let this money go anywhere else, but it's going to stay in Wheaton. That is how the redevelopment project that now is the Park and Planning Building and the Plaza de Marion Friar Plaza came to be. And I used to say, I said I have nightmares that I would be driving by Georgia Avenue and see this concrete platform that we spent $40 million hoping to one day build something on top of a WMATA property. And lo and behold, imagine how the world has changed and how the workplace has changed now with COVID and teleworking. Imagine it would have been another 20 years. And so I just share that because it is not, I understand how important it is for us to carve out policy goals and try to fit them neatly. Sometimes they don't. And I do want to one day see whether we can still utilize that site now that we have, the park and planning building and everything else, now that there's been this signal sent there. We need housing there. Can you imagine housing right there, right next to Metro? And even though WMATA's site, in Glenmont is not that great of a site, who knows if maybe we can do something there as well. I mean, these are prime areas for us. So all that to say, as it has been shared by Council Vice President Glass regarding how much we did litigate this, how much we, worked to overturn this veto. Councilmember Friedson also talked about it. For me, that just brings me back a lot of memories regarding that. That was a while back. I'm about to leave this council, and there are still some areas like Glenmont that I can't believe we have not been able to totally capitalize because a couple of owners of that shopping center have not wanted to move forward. But it does take some time, and we have to also do right by some of the people that live in those areas that have asked and clamored for some amenities, for some opportunities for access to housing. All that to say, thank you, Councilmember Glass. I would be supporting your amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Councilmember Katz would like to speak.
And I'll be very, very quick. I'm not going to support this. I sincerely believe that of all the groups that are working towards getting housing on WMATA property, WMATA is not one of them. They understand, and I understand. I was certainly supportive of trying to work with WMATA and to give them the help to build housing on their property. WMATA is the group that would gain. Montgomery County would gain, but WMATA is the group that would gain the most. This would be ridership for themselves. They are charging top dollar for these pieces of property, and let's face facts, it hasn't gone forward without any requirements before for prevailing wage or anything else, because WMATA is charging top dollar, and they expect governments and everyone else to come forward to help them help themselves. So therefore, I am not going to be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor and the second. All those in favor of the amendment put forward by Council Vice President Glass, please raise your hands. Okay, that is Council Members Navarro, Rice, Friedson, Glass, Albornoz, and Reamer. All those opposed? Council Members Katz, Hucker, and Jawando. That moves us on to the next amendment. Ms. McCartney-Green, can you help me out here? Which one's next?
Mr. President.
Sorry, Councilmember Jawando.
Yeah, I no longer need to offer the amendment. It was rendered moot by a previous action. So if Councilmember Glass can move forward his amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Jawando. Ms. McCartney-Green.
Thank you, Council President. And so looking at Glass, Council Vice President proposed transition clause, it does primarily the same thing that's actually listed in the packet for amendment number 5, but I want to tell you the two exceptions that are happening here. And so section 1 refers to a county finance construction contract if prior to the effective date of this act was executed. And so if it's executed prior to 91 days that this bill will go into effect, that would protect that project and it would not be subject to prevailing wage. The second part of this transition clause refers to a property for which a preliminary plan, a site plan, or a sketch plan was approved by the planning board prior to, and there is a brackets there to remove the language, the effective date of this act, and insert December 31st, 2022. I'm going to stop there before we continue with the comma and literally explain that is referring to a project that has a property that submitted a preliminary plan, a site plan, or a sketch plan to the planning board for approval. They have done that prior to December 31st, 2022. They will be exempted from the prevailing wage. That is the existing pipeline that we're looking at. Sure, that conversation has happened here, that for those projects that have diligently put in their application, they would not be subject to prevailing wage. Now, future projects would, and now with the adoption of Councilmember Vice President Glass's amendment, would only apply to the small selection that we talked about with pilots, the ones that are under 50% of affordable units, the ones that are for profit. And so for clarity, that's the pipeline that we're talking about. We're not talking about WMATA, and we're only talking about a small section under the qualified housing development.
Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you, Ms. McCartney-Green, for explaining the amendment that is now before us. I'd like to move the amendment, and the reason for it is, quite frankly, over the last number of days, I have had so many phone calls with people just concerned about the timeline and trying to understand where their project falls in our intent. And then in reviewing the staff packet from when it was before committee, I had seen that DHCA itself had suggested that the application time, the start date, would be basically the end of this year, so that there would be no questions or ambiguity for any projects that are in any stage of the current timeline. And so that is what this amendment does. It basically removes any ambiguity for projects at any stage, so that DHCA can even do a better job in regulating this once it becomes law.
So that has been moved by Vice President Glass and seconded by Councilmember Rice. Any discussion on this item? No discussion. All those in favor of this amendment, please raise your hands. That is unanimous among those present. Councilmember Joando?
Yes.
And that is unanimous among all of us. Okay, there is one final amendment that is being put forward, I believe, by Councilmember Friedson at the request of staff and the county attorney. Councilmember Friedson.
Yes, thank you, Council President. There's one final outstanding issue that was discussed extensively at committee. It hasn't been resolved, related to the local hiring issue. We had the Office of Procurement weighing in quite a bit in our discussion. We've heard from council attorney, the county attorney, trying to find the happy medium. 25% was the number that we had used previously in the WMATA bill when we discussed this issue as well. And so there's an amendment before you that I've passed out to colleagues. It would amend line 99 to 106 as follows: require best efforts to hire Montgomery County residents for at least 25% of the new jobs to complete the county finance construction contract that exceeds the prevailing wage threshold limit. And then it adds in item 4 for the proper implementation and enforcement necessary to carry out the purpose of this section. The director may adopt and amend regulations in accordance with this section. So I would put that forward for colleagues' consideration.
That has been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Katz. Any discussion on this item? Ms. McCartney-Green, anything we missed on this one? Want to?
No,
Okay,
Council President.
great. All those in favor of this amendment, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present in the chambers, and Councilmember Joando votes yes as well. Okay, colleagues, that wraps up our amendments. Now let's move this. This is a roll call vote. I'd like, could somebody please move as amended what we have just discussed? Moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. And this is a good day, folks. This is going to impact a lot of lives very positively. So we now move to the vote.
Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Mr. Joando?
Yes.
Mr. Joando votes yes. Mr. Reamer? Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes.
All right, let the record show that the bill passed as amended unanimously. Today's my birthday and I need a drink. So thank you all.
I was going to say, I think we
can.
can have the only unanimous vote we've had today. Could we wish him a happy birthday?
That's right.
Yay.
Thank you. All right, but we are not done, colleagues.
really
We
do know how to
now
celebrate,
need
Mr.
to
President.
go to closed session, and so let me read the script here. Hold on. And colleagues, we are moving up to the fourth floor, not the adjacent chambers.
Okay.
Got it. All right, I will need a motion to meet in closed session to discuss appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction pursuant to Maryland Code State Government Article 305B 1I. Topic is legislative branch staffing.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Friedson.
Second.
Seconded by Council Vice President Glass. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. Thank you, colleagues. We are adjourned to closed session.
2020